Chapter 188. Defeated by Yufeng was ranked 4th on the Heaven leaderboard. Originally, he was very dissatisfied with Black Widow and the other two. When he heard that Long Chun had killed more than 10 people in a day and directly killed Black Widow to become the 3rd on the Heaven leaderboard, he thought that those people were just in name only. Long Chun's first concession made him feel that Long Chun was just an empty 3rd on the Heaven list. In reality, Long Chun's combat strength was not strong, which was why he was so aggressive. "Get out of my way, or don't blame me for being rude," Yufeng said arrogantly, as if he was looking forward to Long Chun's concession. That way, he would feel great satisfaction. What welcomed him was the cold gleam of a long sword. Yufeng's speed was extremely fast, and his strength was not weak. The moment Long Chun made his move, he retreated into the crowd behind him. Then he stared at Long Chun with eyes as sharp as knives and laughed coldly. "What? You can't hold back anymore? Then let me see how strong your swordsmanship is compared to the Jianshi San's." As Yufeng's voice fell, a black iron long sword appeared in his hand, and the aura around him suddenly became cold. A long sword appeared in Ao Sangqiong's hand, but he did not intend to make a move. He just stood behind Long Chun. Since he had agreed to travel with Long Chun, he would naturally join forces with him. However, he had no enmity with Yufeng, so he would not make a move. The battle between Long Chun and Yufeng immediately attracted the attention of people from all directions. This was the second battle between the Deqian Empire and the Yuntian Empire. Isn't that someone from the Black Dragon Empire? The one leading the battle with Yufeng should be the famous Long Chun. Why are the two of them fighting? Yufeng is ranked 4th on the Heaven list. He has always wanted to challenge the top 3. Now that Long Chun has defeated the Black Widow and is ranked 3rd, he is naturally unhappy. It's just that we don't know who will win this battle. Yufeng has the royal bloodline of the Great Yu Empire. It is said that he is the number 1 of the younger generation in the Great Yu Empire. Rumor has it that his combat strength is not lower than the Jianshi San's. Everyone was discussing animatedly because both Long Chun and Yufeng were powerhouses on the Heaven ranking of the 9 great empires. Their strength was unparalleled. In the Great Qian Empire, Jianshi San's face was gloomy, but when he heard the people around him comparing him to Yufeng, he immediately said disdainfully, "This kid is just a frog at the bottom of a well. What 4th on the Heaven list? I'll take his head within 10 moves." The surrounding people immediately shut their mouths when they heard this. The scene of Jianshi San wiping out the entire Cloud Sky Empire's participants on the road to immortality was still vivid in their minds. The Marquis of Wind had a calm expression the entire time, but he was slowly led by Jianshi San towards Long Chun and Yufeng. In fact, he did not care about Yufeng's battle strength at all, but he was very curious about Long Chun's true strength. At the same time, the elders of the 5 great sects gradually gathered together in the sky. They were all sitting on flying monstrous beasts in the sky to observe the situation below. "Yo, they've already started fighting in this place, and they're both using swords. No wonder your Wanjian sect was already observing this place." An elder from the long-armed sect stepped on a scaled, 3-winged monstrous beast and flew to the side of the Wanjian sect's people. At the same time, several elders from the Godly Knife sect, wearing long robes with blade patterns, also arrived. When they saw Long Chun in the distance, their pupils immediately shrank. Following them were the 100 Smelting sect and the Divine Vein sect. The expressions of the elders from the various sects were quite good. It seemed like they had gained quite a bit on the road to immortality. Only the elders from the 100 Smelting sect did not have good expressions. That person is the one who angered Qing Yunzi. The news that your Godly Knife sect and Long Arm sect spread has caused quite a few deaths in the Black Dragon Empire. An elder from the Divine Vein sect said, with a playful expression. When the Long Arm sect and the Godly Knife sect heard this, their expressions became unfriendly. They gave a cold snort, but did not say anything. Bang! A loud sound came from below. Long Chun and Yufeng were still fighting. The black iron sword in Yufeng's hand was surrounded by layers of black water will. It was like a tsunami, Under the spiritual light, its momentum was terrifying. This is the black water sword will. It complements well with the tsunami spiritual light sword of the Great Yu Imperial family. This person's understanding of the way of the sword has already reached the entry level. A hint of admiration flashed in the eyes of one of the Wanjian sect's elders. When the people from the other 4 sects heard this evaluation, they gave a cold snort. The reason why the Wanjian sect could become the top of the 5 sects was that most of the people from the 9 great empires who had stepped onto the road to immortality practiced the way of the sword. There were many people who practiced the way of the sword. Among them, there were naturally more talented people than the other sections. This was also the reason why the 100 Smelting sect had always been the last of the 5 sections. That Long Chun is also a genius. There were 3 kinds of sword will in the sword just now. His cultivation seems to be only at the early stage of the divine transformation realm. However, all the sword techniques he used have reached the stage of perfection. It is not an exaggeration to call him a genius. Looking at the fight below, an elder of the 100 Smelting sect could not help but sigh. However, the elder of the Wanjian sect shook his head. He stared at Long Chun and said, "This person looks no more than 20 years old. His cultivation is only at the early stage of the divine transformation realm. However, his combat strength and understanding of the sword will and sword techniques are extraordinary. It is very likely that he has received the inheritance of others. Such a person will only be strong for a short time. Soon, he will be shackled by a bottleneck." Everyone suddenly understood. On the other side, the elder of the Wanjian sect nodded and said in a deep voice, "We have encountered such disciples before in the Wanjian sect. Under normal circumstances, they could not make any progress after reaching the late stage of the divine transformation realm. In fact, other than the sword techniques and sword will that they already have, they could not make any progress in the way of the sword." Everyone nodded in agreement. In the past, there were indeed very few people in the various sects who had encountered such a situation. If these people had walked the path of immortality and met the requirements, the various sects would naturally be willing to accept them. However, it was impossible to give them a place because they valued potential more. For example, Yufeng at the moment and Jian Shusan, who had just fought, were all talents in their eyes. It would be easy for them to reach the Void Return realm in the future. Just as everyone was discussing, Long Chun and Yufeng were already fighting fiercely below. Yufeng's face gradually turned pale because he was shocked to find that he was inferior to Long Chun in both sword techniques and sword will. He was suppressed in every way. That was not all. What frightened him the most was that Long Chun's spiritual power was constantly gushing out from his sea of qi. This spiritual power was violent and terrifying. Once the two of them fought, Long Chun's spiritual power could instantly tear his spiritual power apart. It was extremely terrifying. Boom, boom. Chapter 189. Elder of the Wanjian sect. Yufeng's defeat sent chills down the spines of the people from the Great Yu Empire. They had planned to kill the other disciples of the Black Dragon Empire behind Long Chun, but they were shocked to find that Ao Sangxiong alone was able to stop them all. The speed of his movement technique and the level of his swordsmanship were even more astounding. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to kill them, they would have been dead the moment Long Chun and Yufeng started fighting. Long Chun slowly walked towards Yufeng. He looked at Yufeng, who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, and said, "Do you still want to see how strong I am?" As Long Chun spoke, he raised the sword in his hand and was about to kill him. On this immortal ascension path, if one didn't die, one would die. Long Chun wasn't going to be so kind as to let go of someone who was filled with hatred toward him. As he spoke, Long Chun's sword light descended upon Yufeng's head. Yufeng's face paled, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly tried to block it, but his attack was pale and powerless in front of Long Chun. However, the sword didn't fall for a long time. A Wanjian sect elder was standing in front of Long Chun with a smile on his face. Under everyone's gaze, Long Chun's long sword couldn't move an inch. It was frozen in the air. Long Chun's face instantly turned ugly. He slowly withdrew his long sword and said coldly, "This is the path of immortality. May I ask, what is the meaning of this, elder of the Wanjian sect?" When the Wanjian sect elder heard Long Chen's words, his face turned cold. He said in a low voice, "How dare you, a semi-god realm cultivator, speak to me in such a tone? Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have some inheritance. These things might be able to give you unparalleled battle prowess before you enter the 5 great sects. But once you enter the 5 great sects, you'll be nothing." Long Chen's brows furrowed slightly. He had never expected that an elder of the Wanjian sect would personally step in to save Yufeng. This elder's cultivation was at least at the late stage of the Void Return realm. He was definitely not someone Long Chen could contend with. Although he remembered that in his previous life, Yufeng had also walked the path of immortality and entered the Wanjian sect, he still hadn't finished walking the path of immortality. Yufeng, this is the Immortal Ascension Writ. From today onwards, you are an outer sect disciple of the Wanjian sect. Remember to cultivate well. When you reach the Void Return level, this person might still be an insignificant Void Return level disciple. The Wanjian sect elder casually tossed a token engraved with sword patterns into Yufeng's hand. For a moment, the changes in the scene made everyone unable to react. Even Yufeng was a little stunned. Soon after, he burst into laughter, unable to contain his joy. He had never thought that although he had lost the battle with Long Chen, he would be chosen by an elder of the Wanjian sect. Moreover, he would be given the opportunity to enter the Wanjian sect. The Wanjian sect elder glanced at Long Chen with contempt. However, he knew that his actions were somewhat against the rules, so he didn't continue to do anything. He turned around and was about to leave with Yufeng. However, Yufeng, who was behind him, slowly turned his head and looked at Long Chen mockingly. The smile on his face deepened. "I was wondering why your swordsmanship was so swift and fierce. It turns out that it was an external force. I hope you don't die on the path of immortality. One day in the 5 great sects, I'll definitely cut you down with my sword." Long Chen looked at Yufeng and the elder behind him. He said in a low voice, "When that day comes, I'm afraid you won't be so lucky. When that time comes, my sword won't be as slow as it is today." Long Chen's words made Yufeng's face turn ashen. He was about to continue to mock Long Chen, but unfortunately, Long Chen turned around and walked away. Yufeng swung his sleeves and was about to follow the Wanjian sect elder and leave. However, a voice behind him made his whole body tremble. Long Chen said indifferently, "Kill everyone from the Great Yu Empire for me. Kill them all." As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings were in an uproar. Even the Wanjian sect elder couldn't help but freeze. Long Chen's actions were clearly revenge for him, saving Yufeng. As soon as Long Chen's voice fell, the disciples of the Black Dragon Empire rushed out. It was the Great Yu Empire who had provoked them repeatedly. They had only been forced to fight back. Moreover, this was the road of immortal ascension. The Wanjian sect's blatant favoritism made them furious. At the side, Ao Sanxiong frowned slightly, but he didn't make a move. Long Chen also joined in with his sword. The strength of the disciples of the Black Dragon Empire wasn't enough to deal with the people of the Great Yu Empire. As soon as Long Chen entered the battlefield, mournful screams filled the air. In a short time, everyone from the Great Yu Empire was killed. Long Chen looked at the corpses on the ground. His heart was calm, and he didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. He knew that if Yufeng won today, the elders of the 5 great sects wouldn't come to their rescue. What awaited them was a dead end. He was an Ao Sanxiong. He didn't have any righteousness. Those who killed should be killed. That was Long Chen's way of life. Seeing that Ao Sanxiong didn't make a move, Long Chen wasn't surprised. He even felt that if this wasn't the road of immortal ascension, his big brother would have stopped him. On the other side, Yufeng stood in a daze. His eyes were wide open, and his body couldn't help but tremble. Pucci. Finally, Yufeng spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, unconscious. The Wanjian sect elder's face was extremely ugly. He stared deeply at Long Chen and snorted coldly. He stretched out his hand and used his divine sense to lift Yu Feng up onto the flying demonic beast. Everyone present shook their heads when they saw this scene. Long Chen's action not only completely broke with Yu Feng, but also angered the Wanjian sect elder. It was unwise. On the other hand, everyone knew that the mission given by the Tongbi sect and the Godly Knife sect wasn't as easy as they thought. Wanting to kill Long Chen and obtain 3 spots to enter the 5 great sects was not an easy task. The people from the Great Yu Empire participating in the Road of Immortal Ascension had all been killed. This was the second empire to be destroyed after Jian Shisan's Cloud Sky Empire. Everyone sighed. This was the end of the first stage of the Road of Immortal Ascension. Originally, everyone was supposed to kill as many demonic beasts as possible to obtain as many stone keys and resources as possible. But now, in just 2 battles, 2 empires have been destroyed. At this moment, everyone knew that the later stage of the Road of Immortal Ascension would be extremely tragic. On the other side, where the people of the Great Dry Empire were, the Marquis of Wind looked at Jian Shisan and lightly said, "No wonder this person's battle strength is so strong. That day when you fought with your sword, you were defeated with a single strike. So it was because of external help. That's more like it. This person isn't even 20 years old, but his sword skills and sword intents have all reached perfection. This is simply unbelievable." Jian Shisan coldly snorted. Chapter 190. The middle ground in the first stage, 2 of the 9 empires were destroyed. Only the disciples of the 7 empires were left, and some of them were not from the 9 empires. After the destruction of the younger generation of the 2 empires, the situation calmed down. Almost all the conflicts between the empires were reduced. All the forces wandered between the stone mountains, trying their best to kill the demonic beasts and steal the stone keys. Until the next morning, the stone mountains on the plains were cleared. Many giant, demonic beast corpses lay on the ground. As the cold wind blew, it emitted a bloody smell. Of course, the demonic beasts were not the only ones that died. There were also disciples of the various empires, and there were even late divine transformation realm cultivators among them. There were 3 demonic beasts in the stone mountains on the plains that were comparable to late divine transformation realm cultivators. After they appeared, they killed many disciples of the empires. One of them was killed by Marquis Feng Shou within 10 moves with his folding fan. He obtained 30 stone keys, a 7th grade king ranked martial art, and a jade slip of the Luanyan fist. If someone who practiced fist techniques obtained this jade slip, it would be a great opportunity. However, for Marquis Feng Shou and Jian Shisan, it was useless. On the other side, Long Chen relied on his memory to kill one of the 3 demonic beasts and obtain the most stone keys. Just one demonic beast alone gave him 50 stone keys. Not only that, this demonic beast also gave him many talismans and jade slips with inscriptions. Therefore, Long Chen gradually attracted the attention of the 100 Smelting sect. Originally, with Long Chen's sword cultivation, the Wanjian sect was the most suitable for him. However, they gradually found that Long Chen obtained many items from the 100 Smelting sect after entering the Immortal Path. It seemed that he wanted to join the 100 Smelting sect. Moreover, after what happened at Yufeng, Long Chen would not choose the Wanjian sect, no matter what. In the second stage, find a chance to test him. See if he has talent in weapon refining, alchemy, or talismans. If he has talent, then he may be useless to the Wanjian sect, but he is a very suitable disciple for our 100 Smelting sect. The words of the 100 Smelting sect elder in the sky made the Wanjian sect elder frown. He coldly snorted, "Only your 100 Smelting sect doesn't care about people with limited prospects. That's why you're the last of the 5 sections." The other sect elders couldn't help but shake their heads when they heard these words. They seemed to share the same sentiments. On the contrary, the 100 Smelting sect elder sneered, "Yu Feng's sword cultivation is above average. He can't be compared to Jian Shisan of the Black Dragon Empire. However, you save his life in this critical moment. Isn't it because he is of the royal families of the Great Yus? since when did your myriad sword sect have to give face to Qin Yunzi? The 100 smelting clan's elders' ridicule was self-evident. In fact, everyone was well aware of it, but they didn't expose it. Although Qin Yunqing's cultivation was average, his followers were all over the 5 sections. In particular, some of them were the core geniuses of the 5 sections. Therefore, the 5 sects had to give him some face. The Wanjian sect elder's action of saving Yu Feng was self-evident. If only based on talent, Jian Shisan should be the first one to be given the immortal badge of ascension. The Wanjian sect elder snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. It seemed that he had tacitly agreed. On the other side, the first stage of the immortal path had finally come to an end after the 3 strongest demonic beasts were killed. After a short rest, everyone set off again. In the second stage of the immortal path, Long Chun led the remaining Black Dragon Empire disciples forward. In front of them was still an endless plain. However, there were no stone mountains. Instead, there were 5 huge stone gates that blocked everyone's way. Long Chun knew that most people would be eliminated in the second stage, because this stage tested whether a person had a certain talent, such as sword skills, saber skills, fist skills, alchemy, bloodline, and so on. Only when one's talent met the requirements could they enter the stone gates. Once they entered the stone gates, they would enter the last stage of the immortal path. At that time, as long as they had enough stone keys, they would be able to enter the 5 sections. As they gradually approached the stone gates, 2 groups of people behind Long Chun were eyeing them covetously. These 2 groups of people didn't have many stone keys. Secondly, the resources they obtained in the first stage were extremely limited. The chances of them breaking through the second stage were very small. They had no choice but to think of his team to attack. In the Black Dragon Empire, Long Chun's team was naturally the first choice. Because if they defeated Long Chun, not only would they obtain a large number of stone keys, but they would also obtain many resources to display their talent. They could even obtain 3 places to enter the Godly Saber sect or the Tombi sect. This kind of temptation was really irresistible to the various sections. Although Long Chun's battle strength was astonishing, the disciples of the Black Dragon Empire behind him were the weakest among the disciples of the various sections. Although the 2 groups of people followed closely behind, they were extremely cautious and didn't attack immediately. They were very afraid of Long Chun. After all, the scene of him defeating Yu Feng was still vivid in their minds. If they attack first, I can help you. But I hope you don't kill them as much as possible. If they weren't forced by the situation, I don't think they would attack you. Ao Sanqiong frowned. Long Chun looked deeply at the 2 groups of people behind him who were hesitating. Then, he stared at the 5 stone gates in front of him. Suddenly, a bold idea appeared in his mind. Staring behind him, he said indifferently, "Maybe I can give them a chance to not attack. If they are unwilling and still attack, then life and death will be up to fate." Long Chun walked forward, towards the direction of the 100 smelting sects stone gates. He walked to the top of a huge pill cauldron symbol on the ground. Then, the air in front of him flashed, and inscriptions appeared out of thin air. Then, a pill cauldron that could be hugged by 2 people appeared in front of everyone. At the same time, the elders of the 100 smelting sect in the sky all looked at Long Chun attentively. Long Chun's mind moved, and the flame under the giant cauldron flickered and shot out. He wants to try to refine pills, but he has collected a lot of weapon melting stones. The elders of the 100 smelting sect were quite puzzled. But soon, they discovered a shocking fact. That was, Long Chun's fire-controlling technique had actually reached a level that left people flabbergasted. Then, he even threw the elixirs that he had obtained from the secret cave into the cauldron. It was as if everything was natural and skillful. These few short movements actually revealed an extremely strange sense of beauty. In just a moment, the 2 groups of people behind him gradually could not sit still. If Long Chun was recognized by the 100 smelting sect and was the first to pass through the 5 stone gates, then they would have no chance. But when they gritted their teeth and rushed towards Long Chun retreated from the side of his face where he had just been. He looked at the crowd and said, Even if you don't have the resources, I can still let you test your talent, but it is limited to the 100 Smelting Sect. Chapter 191. Test one's talent. The two groups of people who had planned to attack Long Chun were startled. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. After a while, the leaders of the two groups stood up and asked Long Chun in a deep voice, "Is what you said true? These people's cultivation bases were not as high as you thinks." Originally, they had planned to join forces to attack Long Chun. However, Long Chen's words gave them another choice. Long Chen nodded and pointed to the giant cauldron in front of him and said, "This cauldron is used to test your talent in the second stage. I can imprint a fire-controlling technique, Jade Slip, and a spirit array technique, Jade Slip. You can use them one by one to test whether you have talent in alchemy or spirit rays." Long Chen's words caused an uproar among the crowd. Even the elder of the 100 Smelting Clan, who had been observing Long Chun from the sky, couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Long Chen's fire control and simple alchemy skills had already surprised him. He was even a little tempted. But now, Long Chen's words shocked him. One had to know that all the jade slips left behind on the path of immortal ascension were personally branded by the 100 Smelting Clan's formation elders or king stage alchemists. Even if an ordinary person could comprehend them, it would be extremely difficult to inscribe them again. However, Long Chun actually wanted him to inscribe a jade slip and hand it over to the group of people behind him. Was this really possible? Elder, should we stop him? If he's really able to brand his own jade slip, then wouldn't it be equivalent to cheating in the second stage? A disciple of the 100 Smelting Clan asked with a frown. That 100 Smelting Clan elder said with a smile, "Even if this person has grasped some branding techniques, there should still be many flaws. Moreover, even if these people are tested, how many of them truly have the talent to refine talismans, formations, and medicinal pills?" The elder of the Wanjian sect sneered and said, "It seems that this person has not only inherited the Tao of the Sword, but also some other acrobatic skills. With such a modeled cultivation, I'm afraid that he can't even reach the late stage of Huashan realm. This kind of person who looks like a genius, but is actually a waste, can only enter your 100 Smelting sect." As soon as these words were spoken, the faces of the people of the 100 Smelting Clan and even the many elders immediately darkened. However, they also knew that other than retorting a few words, it was completely useless. After all, strength was the foundation of everything in this world, and the Wanjian sect had always been the most powerful of the 5 sections. The elders of the 5 great sects sat on the wide backs of the flying demonic beasts and watched as the teams below began their tests. There are even some people who had already displayed great talent and directly entered the Stone Gate formation. For example, Jian Shi-san. He walked directly to the front of the Wanjian sect's Stone Gate array. Not only that, but he didn't even integrate any of the resource imprints he had obtained earlier. Instead, he used his powerful sword technique and sword will to kill a puppet in front of him. This puppet was also very strange. It was almost completely immune to all attacks. Only sword techniques and sword will could harm it. Moreover, its defense was very high, which made many people shrink back. On the other side, the Divine Blade sect also gained quite a bit. 2 of them had comprehended 2 different blade intents and easily entered the Stone Gate array. As for the Divine Vein sect, their luck was even better. There was actually a youth in the Mid-Soul Formation realm who had a natural bloodline. This caused the Divine Vein sect's elder to directly hand over the Immortal Ascension token and accept him into the sect. Not only that, the Wind Marquis, also someone with an ancient bloodline. The blue feathers around his body scattered, and he easily passed the test. Then he entered the Stone Gate array. Seeing that there were already people entering the Stone Gate array, many people were filled with envy. As for the 100 Smelting Clan, there was also a different scene. There were fewer and fewer people at the other Stone Gate arrays, but there were more and more people gathered here. The reason for this was because of the jade slip in front of Long Chun. Anyone who picked up this jade slip would actually be able to temporarily comprehend the technique of controlling fire, refining pills, and the technique of formations and incantations. Although this technique was extremely simple. It was enough for them to test whether or not they had the talent to refine pills and incantations. If it was just this, then there would be people who would be suspicious. However, there were actually 3 disciples of the Black Dragon Empire behind Longchun that had the talent to directly enter the Stone Gate Array. This was simply an explosive piece of news for everyone. It had to be known that at this time, not only did many people not have the Stone Key, they didn't even have the resources to take the test. Many people who practiced the sword were forced to participate in the Wanjian sect's test, but the difficulty of entering the Wanjian sect was very high. Without someone with sword intent, almost no one could succeed. As for Longchun, it was the complete opposite. On one hand, there was a free jade slip that could be used. On the other hand, everyone knew that the 100 Smelting Clan was the easiest to enter among the 5 great sects. More and more people walked towards Longchun. Every one of them cupped their fists towards Longchun. There were even a few people with good cultivations who didn't seem to be willing to owe him a favor and directly return the Stone Key. Longchun wasn't polite and directly accepted the Stone Key. In fact, he knew the meaning of these people's actions. After all, once they entered the Stone Gate Array, what followed would be a battle of life and death. After leaving behind the Jade Slip, Longchun saw that all the disciples of the Black Dragon Empire had finished the test, and only 3 people had the qualifications to enter the 100 Smelting Clan. Shortly after, he laughed bitterly and no longer paid attention to the people present. He turned around and walked into the Stone Gate Array. Ao Tsangxiong stared at Longchun's back and laughed involuntarily. In his heart, he secretly thought that Longchun was quite interesting. Not only was his battle prowess amazing, but he also knew how to refine pills and array formations. Of course, the most important thing was that he knew how to brew wine. This made Ao Tsangxiong feel that this trip to the 5 great sects was really not in vain. He directly walked toward the Wanjian sect. Then, he easily smashed the puppet with his sword and stepped into the Stone Gate Array. This scene caused the eyes of the Wanjian sect's elder to widen. He had never thought that Ao Tsangxiong, who was by Longchun's side and hadn't made a move all this time, would actually have a sword cultivation that far surpassed that of Jianshi San's. The Wanjian sect's elder muttered to himself, "I didn't think that the person traveling with Longchun would have such a high sword cultivation. Later, I must recruit him into the sect and draw a clear line with Longchun." On the other side of the sky, the 100 Smelting Clan's elder finally couldn't bear it any longer. He stepped on a flying demonic beast and landed on the ground. All right, next, those whose cultivation hasn't reached the late stage of the deity transformation realm can leave. This jade slip is confiscated. The 100 Smelting Clan's elder smiled bitterly and stared at the jade slip in his hand with a bit of curiosity. The 100 Smelting Clan had originally planned to only recruit a dozen or so disciples, but at this moment, more than 20 people had already entered through their Stone Gate Array. Let me see what kind of array formation and fire control technique this brat has refined. It can actually allow these people to use it in a short period of time and test their talent. As the 100 Smelting Clan's elder spoke, he sank his divine sense into the jade slip. Chapter 192. Immortal Ascension Decrepa. On the Immortal Ascension Road, the 100 Smelting Sect's outer sect elder Su Fu's eyes suddenly opened and a light flashed in them. The jade slip in his hand shattered and turned into pieces of jade that filled the sky. This made the surrounding people look at each other, not knowing what was wrong. There were even some people who guessed that Longchun's actions had angered the 100 Smelting Sect. Su Fu did not care about the crowd and did not explain. He just returned to his original position and remained silent, as if he was thinking about something. As time passed, the second stage of the path of Immortal Ascension closed. The 5 stone door arrays also dissipated. Everyone who had passed through the formation had already appeared in a huge square. In this place, there was a vast mountain range behind them that seemed endless. Many disciples of the 9 great empires had never seen this place before, and some people even guessed that they had already left the 9 great empires. Only Long Chen knew that the 5-stone gate arrays were small-scale space transfer arrays, and they were currently in the trial square at the foot of the 5 great sections. However, there was still some distance between this place and the 9 great empires. But if they flew at full speed with a flying monster beast, they would be able to reach it in a month. Looking up, everyone sighed, and their eyes were filled with hope. The 5 great sects were actually formed by a giant mountain that spanned over 100 miles. There were pavilions on the mountain peaks that were overflowing with greenery and green jade steps that led to the various peaks. There were layers upon layers of mountains all around, but there was a dense, immortal aura and spiritual energy. Sometimes there would even be cranes flying across the sky. The 5 mountain peaks seemed to be connected, but they were actually quite far apart from each other. At the top of each mountain, there was an enormous stone tablet lying horizontally on top of it. From left to right, it was the 100 smelting sect, divine vein sect, divine blade sect, arm sect, and Wanjian sect. Among them, the Wanjian sect was the most eye-catching. This was not because it was the tallest mountain, but rather the opposite. At the top of the Wanjian sect was a very wide platform. This platform was very smooth, and from afar, it looked like someone had cut off half the mountain wind with a sword. Looking at it, most people were in a daze. Only Long Chun and a few others had normal expressions. Among them were Ao Sangqiong, the Wind Marquis, and Jian Shisan. A moment later, when everyone turned around, their expressions were solemn. They subconsciously distanced themselves from the people around them and were extremely vigilant. They all knew that the true cruelty of the path of immortal ascension would only begin here. After a long while, the atmosphere became extremely stifling. The elders of the 5 major sects arrived one after another, riding on their demonic beasts and appearing high in the sky. After that, the leading elder of the Wanjian sect was the first to step on the demonic beast and land on the ground. Then he slowly walked to Jian Shisan's side and said indifferently, "This is the immortal ascension writ. If you accept this writ, you can directly become an outer sect disciple of the Wanjian sect." Jian Shisan frowned. Just as he was about to speak, a hand rested on his shoulder from behind. The Wind Marquis smile was like a spring breeze as he lightly said, "Don't do anything stupid. That Long Chan will eventually have someone who can fight him, but it definitely won't be today." After saying this, the Wind Marquis took a deep look at Ao Sangqiong. It was as if the real threat in his eyes was not Long Chun, but rather Ao Sangqiong beside Long Chun. Jian Shisan nodded his head unwillingly. He coldly looked at Long Chun and then took the immortal ascension writ. When the Wanjian sect elder saw this scene, he began to laugh. He looked at Long Chun with disdain and then casually said, "I heard that you lost to this person in a sword move in the Big Dry Empire. If you want to fight him, you will have plenty of opportunities. He will most likely enter the 100 smelting sect. A month from now, you new outer sect disciples will hold a joint challenge. At that time, you will have plenty of opportunities to crush him. You have to know that the first month after entering the 5 great sects is the greatest change. With your talent in the way of the sword, a single month is enough for you to undergo an earth-shattering change." Jian Shisan nodded his head and cupped his fist as he followed behind. Then the Wanjian sect elder walked towards Ao Sangqiong, but his expression was not good. After coldly looking at Long Chun, he said to Ao Sangqiong, "Your talent in the way of the sword is above Jian Shisan's. You can also obtain the immortal ascension writ and directly become a disciple of the Wanjian sect. However, you have to draw a clear line between yourself and this Long Chun." Long Chun was standing beside Ao Sangqiong, but the elder's words did not contain the slightest taboo. This caused Long Chun to frown, but in his heart, he also knew why the Wanjian sect was so against him. 30% of the reason was because of Yu Feng, and 70% was because of the godly sword sect's wandering cloud elder, Qing Yunzi. According to the memories of his previous life, among the direct disciples of the Wanjian sect, one of them was personally promoted by Qing Yunzi from the 9 great empires. Long Chen had a deep impression of this person because in his previous life, when Long Chun was in the Wanjian sect, this person had died at his hands. Just as Long Chun was reminiscing, Ao Sangxiong shook his head and said, I can enter the Wanjian sect with or without the immortal ascension path. As for the rest, it doesn't seem to be up to you to care. The Wanjian sect elder's expression suddenly froze, and the immortal ascension writ in his hand stiffened. In the end, he could only give a cold shout and leave. Following that was the Divine Vein sect. Naturally, the Wind Marquis was handed over the immortal ascension writ without any suspense. The other sects also began to move. Every sect had 3 immortal ascension writ, and the person who obtained the immortal ascension writ could directly become an outer court disciple of the 5 great sects. On the other side, the 100 Smelting Sect elder immediately walked in front of Long Chun and asked in a deep voice, Was that jade slip really something you made on the spot? It was inscribed with your divine sense. Long Chun nodded his head. The 100 Smelting Sect elder did not hesitate at all and directly handed the immortal ascension writ to Long Chun. Long Chun took the immortal ascension writ, but did not immediately agree. Instead, he said in a deep voice, The 3 disciples of the Black Dragon Empire behind me also have the talent to enter the 100 Smelting Sect. I don't know if it's possible to let them enter the 100 Smelting Sect as well. Su Fu slightly knit his brows when he heard this, but he immediately said, I've seen the 3 of them, and their talent is not bad. It's not impossible to give them the immortal ascension writ, but I only have 3 immortal ascension writ. After giving you one, I only have 2 left. Long Chen's mouth revealed a smile. He had already noticed the talent of these 3 people. Although they could not be considered outstanding, they were definitely outstanding among the people who had chosen to enter the 100 Smelting Sect. Otherwise, he would not have said these words. Then I asked the elder to give the immortal ascension writ to the 3 of them. I, Long Chun, am eternally grateful for this kindness. Long Chun replied. These words caused an uproar in the surrounding people. Even Ao Sangxiong could not help but raise his brows. Chapter 193. Side by side, the 100 Smelting Sect elder glanced around and asked in a deep voice, Do you really want to make this choice? You are like a living immortal ascension order in their eyes. As long as they kill you, they will have 3 spots and can enter the Long by sect or the Godly Knife sect. However, Long Chun smiled faintly and said, Then we'll have to see if they have the strength to take my head. The faces of the people around turned ashen. Many of the people with weaker cultivations chose to retreat. Most of these people had lower cultivations than Yufeng. Moreover, they had received Long Chen's favor during the test, so they did not dare to fight with Long Chun. On the other side, there was a group of people who stared at Long Chun. Just as the 100 Smelting Sect elder Su Fu said, Long Chun was a living immortal ascension order in their eyes. After the elders of the 5 great sects finished selecting the candidates to be promoted to outer disciples, they immediately left the square where Long Chun and the others were. Soon after, the elders of the various large sects took the lead and announced the rankings and rules of this recruitment one by one. The Wanjian sect is recruiting 20 disciples. The number of stone keys must reach 100. The Long Bai sect is recruiting 10 disciples. The number of stone keys must be 80. The Godly Pole sect is recruiting 13 disciples. The number of stone keys must be 50. After 3 hours, if you can meet the requirements, you can enter any sect. There are no other rules. After the requirements of the various sects were announced, the entire square became tense. Everyone knew that these 3 hours would be a chaotic battle. Outside the square, Jian Shisan and Marquis Feng's eyes fell on Long Chun. They wanted to see what kind of strength Long Chun had today. In the square, after the elders of the 5 great sects finished speaking, the scene suddenly changed. The square was unexpectedly divided into 3 areas. The first area was Long Chun and Ao Sangxiong. In the second area, there was a group of soul formation advanced stage cultivators. Some of them were from the 9 great empires, some were on the heaven roll, and some were not well known, but their auras were not weak. They seemed to be very confident. Finally, the the third area was very obvious. The strength of these people was obviously one level lower. They knew that they were not a match for Long Chun. Moreover, most of them had received Long Chen's favor when they had just been tested. Naturally, they would not be so stupid as to think of attacking Long Chun. Long Chun had easily defeated Yu Feng, which was enough to make this group of people retreat, not daring to have the slightest bit of hope. Long Chun looked at the dozens of people in the second area. He knew that these people were his real opponents. With the help of his divine mind, he was able to see the cultivation of this group of people. The weakest among them was at the 7th tier of the divine transformation realm. In other words, each of these people was an expert in the advanced stage of the divine transformation realm. Long Chun was confident that he could defeat a late-stage divine transformation realm cultivator easily. Even if he had to face an early-stage divine transformation realm cultivator, he could still fight or even win. However, when these dozens of people worked together, their strength was not to be underestimated. Among them, a few young men in their late 20s walked out of the crowd. They looked at Long Chun mockingly, then said to the people next to them, "Kill the two of them and divide the stone keys equally. The 3 spots that they represent will also be given 1 spot each." It turned out that these dozens of people belonged to 3 different forces. At this moment, in their eyes, Long Chun and Ao Sangxiong were already dead. Even the people from the 5 major sects shook their heads one by one. These dozens of people in the advanced stage of the divine transformation realm were very powerful when they attacked together. Even though Long Chun and Ao Sangxiong had extraordinary combat strength, they were afraid that only death would await them. However, at this moment, Ao Sangxiong was the first to speak. He looked at everyone and asked an idiotic question that stunned everyone. He said, "Are you going to kill the 2 of us?" Such a question made everyone present a little confused. Was there even need to ask? Long Chun was the only one who shook his head and smiled bitterly. He knew what Ao Sangxiong meant. However, this also made him feel a little relieved. If he had Ao Sangxiong's help against these dozens of people, the pressure on him would be reduced by a lot. Is this guy an idiot? Do you still think you can live? Today, neither you nor Long Chun will be able to live. As soon as this person finished speaking, Ao Sangxiong nodded in an extremely serious manner. The long sword in his hand had been unsheathed at some point in time. Long Chun looked at Ao Sangxiong's expression and could not help but laugh. He said, "If they didn't want to kill you, would you just watch them die? I will save you, but I won't kill them. After all, although the wine is good, it can't be exchanged with human lives. However, I still cherish my life very much. Since they want to take it, they are naturally prepared to be killed," Ao Sangxiong said in a low voice. Long Chun and Ao Sangxiong went back and forth. They actually ignored the dozens of experts' covetous gazes in front of them. The dozens of people seemed to have been insulted. They directly divided into 2 groups and rushed toward Long Chun and Ao Sangxiong. The few experts who were leading the group rushed toward Long Chun almost simultaneously. They all wanted to take down Long Chun in one fell swoop and snatch the 3 places on the road of immortal ascension. As for Ao Sangxiong, they directly chose to leave him to the others. Rumble. Golden aura suddenly spread around Long Chun's body. His body floated back like a swan goose. At the same time, the long sword in his hand slashed in the air. Rays of sword light instantly turned into a violent storm and attacked the crowd. The few people's footsteps suddenly stopped, but they turned around and faced the difficulties head-on. However, at this moment, miserable screams came from the side. The few experts who were leading the group turned around and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They saw Ao Sangxiong's long sword swinging wildly. Wherever it passed, the enemies were killed with one slash. When the people from the Wanjian sect saw this scene, they couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. They originally thought highly of Ao Sangxiong. However, the strength that Ao Sangxiong displayed now shocked them even more. For a moment, everyone no longer dared to focus all their attention on Long Chun. The dozens of people almost split in half and attacked Ao Sanxiong, especially the few people who were leading the group. Although they were in the late stage of the soul formation realm, their strength was far superior to the others. They had no choice but to split 3 people to suppress Ao Sanxiong. This greatly reduced the pressure on Long Chun. Long Chun looked at the people in front of him and then looked at Ao Sanxiong. In the previous life, the two of them fought with their backs to the wall. The rulers of the 10 directions, celestial domain trembled. Today, the two of them joined forces again. How could they be defeated? 17 people, 2 hours. Scales began to appear on Long Chen's body. A powerful aura gradually enveloped his entire body. Ao Sanxiong heard his voice from afar. He was stunned for a moment before he replied, 14 people, 1 incense stick's worth of time. As the two of them finished speaking, they actually rushed forward together, rushing into the midst of the opponents who had originally surrounded them. This scene caused the people around them to tremble in fear. Chapter 194. Another sword duel. The two groups were separated, but they still had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers. The moment Long Chun and Ao Sanxiong charged into the crowd, everyone cried out in surprise. Even the other people on the field stopped fighting. Among the elders of the 5 major sects, the people of the Wanjian sect had a whole new level of respect for Ao Sanxiong. Unlike Long Chun, Ao Sanxiong's attacks always carried a kind of awe-inspiring chi. His martial arts skills had not reached the stage of perfection, but his awe-inspiring sword was extremely solid. Apart from the Wanjian sect, the elders of the Divine Pulse sect were also staring at Long Chun. They had never thought that not only was Long Chen's swordsmanship extraordinary, but he also possessed an ancient bloodline. Most of the disciples of the Divine Vein sect had ancient bloodline and had outstanding combat strength. Among the 5 sects, their combat strength was second only to the Wanjian sect. Looking at Long Chen's scales, which made him look like a deity, the elder of the Holy Pulse sect couldn't help but feel puzzled. Long Chen's swordsmanship was world-shocking, and his combat capability was unparalleled. If he had not chosen the Wanjian sect, it would have been fine. However, his bloodline power could not be faked. He could have chosen to enter the Holy Range sect. Why did he choose the weakest 100 smelting sect? Boom! In the arena, Long Chun and Ao Sanxiong's battle prowess was astonishing, causing the 5 great sects to raise their eyebrows. Both of them possessed combat prowess comparable to Return to Void stage mighty figures, and each of them was able to fight against a dozen or so soul formation stage mighty figures. Time ticked by, and in the blink of an eye, 15 minutes had passed. At this moment, the more they fought, the more shocked they became. Regardless of whether it was Long Chun or Ao Sanxiong, both of them actually possessed extremely profound movement martial skills. They were able to move around the group of over 10 people with ease, not giving them any chance to attack together. Ao Sanxiong killed an enemy with a swing of his sword, then retreated quickly and turned around to tease Long Chun. If this goes on, you won't be able to finish off 17 people in 2 hours. The corners of Long Chen's mouth curled into a smile. He leaped into the air, and his powerful scale armor ignored the attacks coming from all directions. At the same time, he pointed his sword at the sky. Sword art, dragon drawing art. Following Chong Chen's shout, the sword light under his sword swayed, bringing with it the sound of wind and thunder. It was as if a huge dragon had rushed out from the clouds and descended. Rumble. A huge crack that was more than 100 meters long was instantly blasted open on the entire field. Wherever the sword passed, a group of people would scream endlessly. This sword strike was able to render several soul formation final stage cultivators useless. At the same time, the elders of the Myriad Sword sect and the Divine Pulse sect stood up at the same time and cried out, "What kind of bloodline power is this?" It actually had such a strong defensive power, resisting the attacks of several divine transformation realm experts. That was an Emperor-tier sword technique, that has reached perfection. For a moment, everyone cried out in surprise. The Emperor Tier sword technique that had reached perfection made everyone's eyes almost pop out. The Elder of the 100 Smelting Sect also changed his expression slightly. He immediately stared at the Elder of the Wanjian Sect and ridiculed. In the eyes of the Wanjian Sect, the so-called inheritance is just a shackle. Why are you making such a fuss? The Elder of the Wanjian Sect turned green and red. He snorted coldly, feeling that he had lost his composure. In terms of timing, if he had known that Long Chun possessed an Emperor Tier martial arts technique that had reached perfection, he would not have sneered at Long Chun like this. Behind him, Jian Shisan's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. He had always been obsessed with swords. At this moment, seeing that Long Chun had used an Emperor Tier martial arts technique that had reached perfection, his heart was burning with the desire to fight. In the field, with Long Chen's sword strike, the situation on both sides had become one-sided. Damn it, how can this person be so powerful? Everyone showed a hint of fear towards Long Chun and Ao Tsangqiang. For a moment, no one dared to attack the two of them again. The combat strength of Long Chun and Ao Tsangqiang was simply beyond their imagination. One of them was in the early stage of the Divine Transformation Realm, while the other was in the middle stage of the Divine Transformation Realm. However, their combat strength was comparable to that of the Void Return Realm. This was simply too terrifying. After a brief hesitation, these people's faces turned pale. In the end, they slowly retreated and set their eyes on another group of people who were slightly weaker. The two of them were too strong. These people even thought that if they continued to fight, they would pay a painful price even if they defeated Long Chun. Moreover, time was gradually running out. Instead of that, they might as well take a step back and try their best to snatch the stone keys from the hands of the weaker group of people. Although this would reduce the number of people entering the 5 major sects, it was undoubtedly the safest way. Seeing these people retreat, Long Chun and Ao Tsangqiang had no intention of chasing after them. Although these people in front of them were not as strong as them, if they fought to the death, even if they won, they would have to pay a painful price. After all, these people were in the late stage of the Divine Transformation Realm, especially the few people in the lead. If they fought to the death and used their secret techniques, even Ao Tsangqiang and Long Chun will be difficult to deal with. For a moment, Long Chun and Ao Tsangqiang stood in place. No one dared to challenge them. On the other side, the group of experts who originally challenged Long Chun were like wolves in a flock of sheep. They crazily beheaded the weak and gathered all the stone keys. This path of immortality was nearing its end. At this moment, Jian Shisan slowly walked out from behind the Wanjian sect elders and entered the battlefield with a few movements. His body emitted a terrifying aura, like a sharp sword piercing through the sky. I want to compete with you again. Jian Shisan's voice resounded throughout the battlefield. Everyone's attacks paused. Seeing this scene, Marquis Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. The Wanjian sect elder was also stunned. He never thought that Jian Shisan would jump out at this time. Long Chen narrowed his eyes and stared at Jian Shisan. He said lightly, "You've already accepted the immortal writ of immortality, so you're a disciple of the Wanjian sect. Do you still want to challenge me now?" Jian Shisan snorted coldly. Under everyone's gaze, he threw the path of immortality into the crowd, as if he was throwing away trash. Although you're in the early stage of the Divine Transformation Realm, you're not weaker than the late stage of the Divine Transformation Realm. You're even comparable to the Void Return Realm. This is the best time for me to fight with you, Jian Shisan said in a deep voice. Long Chen heard this and looked at Jian Shisan in a new light. This person was quite upright. Jian Shisan wanted to have a fair fight with Long Chen in a situation where their combat strength was almost the same. Idiot! The Wanjian sect elder couldn't help but shout. In his eyes, although Long Chen's combat strength was strong, he would definitely be shackled in the future. Jian Shisan could easily defeat him after reaching the Void Return Realm. At this point, Marquis Feng, who was standing behind the Divine Vein sect elder, stared at Jian Shisan. He shook his head and couldn't help laughing. He slowly walked down the field and muttered, "When will you change this temper of yours? But since we're going to fight, let's have some exercise today." After saying this, Marquis Fong also threw out the Divine Vein Sect's immortal writ of immortality. His gaze gradually fell on Ao Sanqiao. Chapter 195. Follow me for 10 years, Feng Qing Ho. Number 1 on the heaven leaderboard of the 9 great empires. Jian San. Number 2 on the heaven leaderboard. Long Chun. Number 3 on the heaven leaderboard. They attracted everyone's attention as they stood on the stage. Who would have thought that they would choose to step down from the stage after receiving the immortal writ of ascension? Long Chen's eyes flashed as he stared at Jian San. "You can't beat me, so why waste your sword, Dao?" Long Chen's words caused an uproar among the crowd. Jian San held a sword at the age of 5 and comprehended sword intent at the age of 10. His sword Dao had reached perfection, and he was considered a genius of the sword Dao in the Deqian Empire. Although Long Chen's combat strength was top-notch, his words were extremely arrogant. "Do you think that I'm afraid of you, just because you have the combat strength of a Void Return cultivator?" Jian San said coldly. Long Chun shook his head and replied, "Although your cultivation is only at the 7th level of the soul transformation realm, with your understanding of the sword Dao, I'm sure you won't be afraid of an ordinary Void Return cultivator. But you will still lose to me, because you will lose to my sword intent, sword technique, and sword force." Jian San's expression became more and more unsightly. When Long Chun used the Emperor Stage martial skill just now, how could he not know that there was a huge gap between their sword Dao? But he knew that he could not back down today, even if he died. Otherwise, his sword Dao would be completely stagnant. He could not back down if he wanted to fight. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. Today, no matter the outcome, he had to fight. Long Chen looked at Jian San. After a while, he smiled and nodded slightly. "Since our battle is unavoidable, why don't we bet on something?" "Bet on what?" Jian San asked subconsciously. Long Chen smiled. "Today, you and I will compete in 3 moves: sword intent, sword force, and sword technique. If you beat me in any of these, I will never use a sword again. If you lose, you will be my master and follow me for 10 years. Long Chen's words stunned Jian San. Then he became furious and shouted, "Fine, I want to see what ability you have to be my master." Long Chen smiled, but didn't say anything. The aura around him suddenly dispersed, and the power of his bloodline also dissipated instantly. He raised the horned dragon sword in front of him and said calmly, "The first move, we will compete with sword intent." As soon as Long Chun finished speaking, the sword in his hand slashed down diagonally under the gazes of everyone present. It was extremely flat and seemed as if it didn't have the slightest trace of strength. However, in the eyes of the many elders of the 10,000 Swords sect, all of them were shocked. Even Jian San, who was in front of Long Chun, stared at the sword in Long Chen's hand before he slowly closed his eyes. Before Chong Chen's sword fell, Jian San's sword slowly rose. The movements of the 2 swords were extremely slow, so slow that everyone felt an incomparable pressure in their hearts. Clang! Their swords clashed and scattered upon contact. Waves of sword cries could be heard, separate and intersect. The exchange of blows between the 2 seemed to be a casual dance, without the slightest bit of power. It was like children playing, but Jian San's forehead was gradually covered with sweat. But under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a piece of cloth fell from the sky. Long Chen's long sword had somehow blocked Jian San's long sword and landed on the corner of Jian San's neck. The blade of the sword did not touch his clothes. A cool breeze brushed past the corner of his clothes, and the area near the blade of the sword seemed to be cut open. The first move, sword intent. "I've lost," Jian San said in a low voice. Long Chen smiled, but did not say anything. His body was as calm as the wind and clouds. Then he slowly removed the long sword in his hand from Jian San's neck and said lightly, "2 more moves." Jian San snorted coldly. This time, he took the lead with his sword. This sword, from top to bottom, although there was no spiritual light, it had the power to split Mount Hua. This sword seemed to have no power, but it frightened everyone present and made them subconsciously take a step back. Looking at this sword, it actually had the power to break the Yellow River's dam and cut the mountains and rivers. Long Chen nodded slightly. He had to admit that Jian San was really a genius in the way of the sword. This was also the reason why Long Chen wanted to take him in. However, Jian San and Long Chen had little interaction in his previous life. Although they were both in the Wanjian sect, they didn't know each other. On the other hand, Jian San died a violent death less than a month after entering the Wanjian sect. This was also Long Chen's understanding of him in his previous life. Bang! Jian San's mighty sword strike was about to land on Long Chen's head, but it was forcefully broken by Long Chen with a light flick. At the same time, Long Chen's long sword swung, and a medium-sized mountain rock dozens of meters away was instantly broken into pieces. Hiss! Many elders in the Wanjian sect couldn't help but gasp and say in horror, "This guy really didn't use spiritual power just now. He just used his sword to break the rock dozens of meters away. This guy, no matter whether he has received the inheritance of others or whether he has been imprisoned, he should still enter the Wanjian sect. He can only blame himself for offending Qin Yunzi of the Godly Knife sect. If it weren't for his relationship with the Inner Gate Elder's core disciple, he wouldn't have been targeted this time." Everyone sighed endlessly. The sword Dao cultivation that Long Chen displayed at this moment was already heaven-defying. Even some elders felt that they were inferior to him. However, everyone knew that it was impossible for Long Chen to enter the Wanjian sect. This was because the core disciple, Mo Qian, the core disciple of the Inner Gate Elder, had personally said that he wanted to take his life. And this Mo Qian was personally promoted by Qin Yunzi from the Yuntian Empire and adopted as his son. On the other side, Long Chen ignored the shocked gazes of the crowd and looked at Jian San with blazing eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Do you still want to compete with the third move?" Jian San's eyes were bloodshot, and he couldn't stop breathing heavily. The joints of his long sword had turned white from overexertion. Ever since he started practicing swordsmanship, no one had ever suppressed him in swordsmanship. Moreover, it was someone younger than him. Compete. Sword of 8 Desolation. Jian San seemed to have gone crazy as he displayed his strongest sword move. He knew that this was his last chance. If his sword move was defeated, then he would lose completely. However, he immediately fell into despair. Under everyone's gazes, Long Chen was still as calm as ever, as if his sword move was childish in front of Long Chen. A casual attack was easily defeated. Ka. The long sword in Jian San's hand flew out. He had lost completely. "I, Jian San, have lost, but I, Jian San, will never become a disciple of a young man like you. Even if I die, I will never do it." As Jian San's voice fell, his hand moved and the long sword on the ground fell towards his neck. Beside Jian San, Marquis Feng's expression changed. Everything that had happened was too fast for him to react. It was too late for him to stop it. Long Chen saw this scene and gave a cold snort. He stabbed out with his sword, and the golden light on it surged like a tide. Chapter 196. He wanted to see her. Jian San's sword shattered inch by inch, and Jian San was frozen in place. Long Chen stared at Jian San and said in a deep voice, "Accepting a bet and using death to renege on a debt. Is this your way of the sword? Follow me for 10 years, and I will let your sword cultivation reach an unprecedented level." The veins on Jian San's face popped out as he looked at the shattered sword on the ground. Finally, he stared at Long Chen and fiercely said, 10 years. We'll compete again in 10 years. Jian San had actually been forcefully taken in by Long Chen like this. This made the people of the 5 great sects have strange expressions on their faces. The Wind Marquis on the side stared at Long Chun with an ugly expression on his face. He wanted to persuade Jian Shi-san to go back on his words, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. This was because he knew that Jian Shi-san would not go back on his words. On the other side, the faces of the Wanjian sect's elders all turned pale. The sword genius that should have entered their sect was now mysteriously taken in by Long Chun. Looking at Jian Shi-san behind Long Chun, the Wind Marquis slowly walked towards Long Chun. His face was filled with killing intent, since Jian Shi-san was not willing to break the bet and go back on his words. Then he would kill Long Chun. As long as Long Chun was not around, everything would be fine. Long Chun seemed to have seen through the Wind Marquis intentions. He only shook his head and said, "He will take me as his master, and in at most a month, he will understand the wisdom of his decision today. You don't need to do this." The Wind Marquis coldly said, "Although your sword cultivation is heaven-defying, it is only because of the inheritance of others. Do you have the qualifications to become his master?" Seeing the Wind Marquis killing intent, Long Chun did not say anything. Instead, Jian Shi-san stood up and said to the Wind Marquis in a deep voice, "It's just 10 years. I'll follow him for 10 years, and with his sword skills, I'll defeat him in 10 years. Jian Shi-san's eyes filled with unprecedented determination. The Wind Marquis stopped and took a deep look at Long Chun. Then he turned and charged into the crowd, taking the stone key. His combat prowess was extremely terrifying. Even late, divine transformation stage cultivators were no match for him. Time quickly in the immortal path. Ao Tsangxiong in the end chose the Wanjian sect, and Jian Shi-san followed Long to enter the 100 sect. Bye-bye the Wind Marquis. By the Wind Marquis, in the end, by the divine bloodline, to enter the divine, to enter the divine bloodline. Seeing Long Chun, Jian Shi-san, and the Wind Marquis, the 100 refining sect's elder Su Fu's face turned red. These three were the top 3 experts of the heaven ranking of the 9 great empires, and they had actually entered the 100 refining sect at the same time. In the past, this kind of thing would never happen. On the other hand, the Wanjian sect and the divine bloodline sects' faces turned pale. Their 2 seedlings had mysteriously chosen to enter the 100 refining sect because of Long Chun, making them very angry. A sword genius has been wasted in your hands. Perhaps in a month, he won't even be able to defeat Yufeng. The Wanjian sect's elder took a deep look at Long Chun and said in a cold voice. Yufeng behind him was stunned. His face was a bit strange, but he did not dare refute. After all, he knew that in terms of cultivation, he was not a match for Jian Shi-san. Long Chun lightly said, "We'll see in a month." The path of immortal ascension ended. According to the number of disciples who entered the sects began to calculate the resources of the empires. In this path of immortal ascension, the 4 people from the Black Dragon Empire had become disciples of the 100 refining sect and received many resources. Although the 100 refining sect did not have a high status among the 5 great sects, the resources given to them were enough to stabilize the Black Dragon Empire's position among the 9 great empires. After the path of immortal ascension, the resources given to the empires were based on the number of people who entered the sect. This was the rule of each path of immortal ascension. After everything was over, Long Chun and the others were led to the mountain peak by the 100 refining sect's elder. After leaving the path of immortal ascension and entering the territory of the 5 great sects, it was as if they had stepped from a battlefield into a paradise. Even the air was tranquil. The 5 great sects were located vertically on the mountain peaks, and the 100 refining sect was on the leftmost mountain peak. You 20 people will stay here for today. Tomorrow, I will send people to bring all the things you need in the sect. The 100 refining sect may not be as good as the other sects, but in terms of resources, we are definitely the best of the 3 sects. Elder Su Fu arranged for Long Chun and the others to stay in the small huts at the foot of the mountain and then left first. These past few days on the path of immortal ascension had made everyone feel a little tired, so they all found a room to sleep in. Only Long Chun and the 3 Black Dragon Empire disciples, as well as the Wyn Marquis and Jian Shursan, stood in the open space outside the huts. They raised a flame and sat in front of the huts. Why did you choose the 100 Refining sect? With your strength, even if you don't like the Wanjian sect, the Divine Vein sect will definitely welcome you. The Wyn Marquis finally asked the question in his heart. Long Chen smiled and did not answer. He looked at Jian Shursan and said, "Are you still angry in your heart right now? Do you feel that taking me as your master is not as good as entering the Wanjian sect?" Jian Shursan gave a cold snort. Even the Wyn Marquis couldn't help rolling his eyes at him. He secretly thought in his heart, "How old are you? Even if your sword cultivation is strong, how can you compare to the experts of the Wanjian sect?" Long Chun stared at the flame in front of him and said to Jian Shursan, "Although your sword intent is strong, it is very simple. Your sword moves are compatible with your sword aura, but they go against your sword intent. Today will be my first lesson to you." Long Chun said this and ignored Jian Shursan and the Wyn Marquis. He walked forward and pointed at Jian Shursan's forehead. The Wyn Marquis did not think that Long Chun would suddenly make a move. His killing intense sword, and he wanted to make a move against Long Chun. After all, Long Chun's current actions were too dangerous. If he wanted to kill Jian Shursan, then he would die without a doubt. Wait! However, at this time, Jian Shursan suddenly raised his hand and stopped the Wyn Marquis. The other 3 disciples of the Black Dragon Empire looked at each other in confusion. They did not know what Long Chun was doing. After a while, Long Chun let out a sigh of relief. He returned to his original position and softly said, "How much you can comprehend will depend on yourself." Jian Shursan's face was serious. His eyes kept changing as he stared at Long Chun. In the end, he closed his eyes and sat cross-legged in place. Sitting like this, he did not know if it was night or day. After Long Chun and the others left, only the Wyn Marquis remained by Jian Shursan's side. Until the next morning, Jian Shursan was still like this. He did not move at all, as if he was meditating. After Long Chun received the token and the other items, he did not go with the others to choose a cave. Rather, he walked out of the sect. This was because he remembered that the first morning after the Immortal Path was when the 5 great sects' holy maidens, Yi Hailon, returned to the sect. He wanted to see her. In his previous life, Long Chen's eyes were blinded by hatred. He only focused on cultivating and had let down too many people. And this Yi Hailon was a knot in his heart that he could not untie. Chapter 197. The Resurrection of the Red Spider Lily Yi Hailon, the Red Spider Lily of the 5 great sects. It was Long Chen's greatest regret in his previous life when he tried to seek revenge. When Long Chun walked out of the 100 Refinement sect, he was surrounded by a sea of people. Everyone looked at the sky expectantly. However, the sky was still cold. After a while, a flying demonic beast appeared in the sky. It was a fire-feathered demonic beast. It looked like a bird, but its feathers were like fire. It was extremely beautiful. Behind the demonic beast, 4 to 5 figures attracted everyone's attention. There were 3 men and 2 women. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. It was rare for them to be tall and straight. The women were graceful, with waists like willows and faces like peach blossoms. When the exotic beast approached, everyone felt the temperature drop a few degrees. However, everyone looked infatuated as they stared at the woman in a light blue dress in front of the demonic beast. The cold aura emitted by the azure dress was a stark contrast to the demonic beast under her feet. As the demonic beast landed, a strange fragrance spread in the air. It seemed to blend into the air and drifted among the 5 great sects with a breeze. The refreshing fragrance caused everyone's faces to be at a loss. Every pair of eyes was staring at the woman's face in front of them. They were gradually infatuated. Her skin was like jade. Her face was like peach blossoms. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her lips were like cream. Her every move was enough to tug at people's heartstrings. The holy lady of the 5 great sects, Yi Hailon. Long Chun looked at her in a daze. Thousands of memories flashed through his mind. In his previous life, he had risen in the Wanjian sect and had interacted with Yi Hailon several times. He had even saved her life in the sect's mystic realm. Yi Hailon looked as cold as ice, but her heart was like fire. She was unyielding and generous. She had expressed her feelings to Long Chun many times, but she was rejected by Long Chun many times. In his previous life, Long Chun was only focused on revenge. He used almost all means to increase his cultivation. He did not have the heart of a woman. Because of this, Yi Hailon was eventually pushed to the ancient desolate lands Li family by the 5 great sects. In the end, Yi Hailon was forced to marry Li Qianye, the young master of the Li family, for various reasons. In his melancholy, his 1,000 severance body was completely activated, and his cultivation level skyrocketed. Under the overdraft of his life force, he slaughtered the Li clan and was later surrounded and killed by countless experts. Known as the Red Spider Lily of the 5 great sects, Yi Hailon dismounted from her flying demonic beast and slowly walked towards the Wanjian sect. Although she was the saintess of the 5 sects, she had lived in the Wanjian sect for a long time. Following her light footsteps, everyone followed closely, as if they just wanted to take a few more glances. Looking at the surging crowd, Long Chun sighed endlessly, but gradually retreated and walked towards the 100 Smelting clan. He muttered to himself, "In this life, I would rather betray the world than betray you." In Long Chen's previous life, there were only 2 women who moved his heart. The first was naturally Qing Xian, who had been with him since he was young and had helped each other in difficult times. The other was Yi Hailon. The 2 of them had fought to the death in the 5 great sects, discussing sword techniques together, and could be said to be close friends. His personality moved Long Chen's heart even more. This was also the reason why in his previous life, although he was a ruler, he was still single. It had to be known that in this world where the strong were respected, it was normal to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Experts who had reached the ruler realm were all overlords, with many wives and concubines by their side. Only Long Chun had pursued the illusory path of reincarnation alone, and now he had already been reborn, so in this life, he would follow his heart and not leave any regrets. Calming down his thoughts, Long Chun returned to the 100 Smelting clan. Jin Shur-san was still sitting in the same place, and the Wind Marquis was still by his side. When he saw Long Chun, the Wind Marquis said in a cold voice, "What did you do to him? Why does he seem like he's possessed?" Long Chun stared at Jian Shur-san and gave a slight nod, as if he was very satisfied with his current state. He did not pay attention to the Wind Marquis and turned to leave, heading towards the 100 Smelting clan's peak. At the same time, within the Godly Knife sect, the Long Arm sect, and even the Wanjian sect, the direct disciples of the various large sects had all received Qing Yunzi superstition. Godly Knife sect. In the 3rd floor of the cave, there was a 30-year-old purple-haired youth. The superstition in his hand had turned to ashes, and he had a strange smile on his face. For a while, it was as if the temperature in the cave had dropped. After a while, 3 elders walked in from outside. Although the 3 of them were origin-returning realm elders, they were very respectful towards this person, as if they were afraid of him. Why are the people of the Black Dragon Empire still alive? That Long Chun even entered the 100 Smelting clan? The purple-haired youth's voice was very cold. The 3 late origin-returning realm elders immediately broke out in a cold sweat, and one of them quickly explained, "That Long Chun seems to have obtained the inheritance of a predecessor. Within the same realm, his battle strength is almost invincible." Not only that, many disciples of the various large sects have been defeated. Because of this, too many people are paying attention to him, so we are unable to personally make a move, the purple-haired youth said in a deep voice. Although Foster Father is currently in seclusion at the peak, he knows everything that is happening in the outside world. No matter what, I want you to bring me Long Chen's head before the Wanjian sect and the Long Arm sect. The 3 origin-returning realm elders were scared witless. They quickly agreed and then crawled away. Who would have thought that the elders of the Godly Saber sect would be so submissive in front of a disciple? That old man Qin Yunzi's strength is not that great. I didn't expect that he would be able to connect with the ancient Li family in the ancient desolate land, and even obtain a Thunder Spirit Tao fruit. If I can obtain this fruit, I will have a chance to become the strongest person in the 5 large sections. I will be the first among the younger generation to step into the late origin returning realm, or even the Tao integration stage. A scene similar to the one in the Godly Saber sect was playing out in the Wanjian sect and the Long Arm sect at the same time. Several core disciples of the various sects had given orders to kill Long Chun. At this moment, Long Chun found the elder who had received them and asked, "May I know where the weapon refining place is? I have a weapon that I would like to refine." Su Fu glanced at Long Chun and said with a smile, "You have an extremely thorough understanding of formations and alchemy. The things in the jade slip that day really shocked me. Could it be that you also know how to refine weapons?" Long Chun shook his head and said, "I don't know much about weapon refining. I just want to use the spirit melting stone to try to repair a weapon. It was a little inconvenient on the immortal path that day, so it has been delayed until now." Su Fu nodded and secretly thought that Long Chun was just casually refining and did not care. He led him to the weapon refining hall on the left and right sides of the middle level of the 100 refining peak. "You have just entered the sect. In 2 days, I will report your situation to the sect master. At that time, I will make a set of plans for you," Su Fu said before leaving. Long Chun nodded. Naturally, he understood Su Fu's intention to cultivate Long Chun as a seed disciple of the 100 refining sect. As soon as Long Chun entered the weapon refining hall, he immediately felt a scorching aura. However, when he entered the hall, he discovered an extremely awkward situation. There was actually a very long queue here. Chapter 198. 3 Can't Be Provoked. The 100 Smelting Clan had a total of 99 floors, and each floor had countless caves. The crafting hall Long Chun was on a platform on the 22nd floor. Long Chun looked at the long line and smiled bitterly. The 100 Smelting Clan was the last of the 5 great sects, but he didn't expect there to be so many disciples. But thinking about it, the 100 Smelting Clan could be said to have the loosest entry requirements among the 5 great sects, so this was reasonable. Long Chun shook his head and casually stood behind a shirtless man at the end of the line. The man had big shoulders and a round waist, and when he saw Long Chun, he nodded slightly in greeting. He could be considered approachable. Long Chun was bored to death as he stood behind the crowd and waited. In his mind, he was thinking about how many formations he needed to inscribe on the spirit melting stone. Looking at the dozens of crafting rooms, Long Chun still had 3 people in front of him even when the sun was high up in the sky. At this time, not far away, a man walked down the stairs from above. His face was incomparably arrogant, and his body was covered in gold and jade, like a nouveau riche. Especially the shining teeth under his thick lips. They were inlaid with the best grade spirit stones. When this person just appeared, the people around him couldn't help but respectfully call out, "Greetings, Senior Kong." This Senior Kong raised his head and nodded very casually. He walked towards the crafting room in front of him, followed by 2 servants. Their appearance was even more superior, as if their status was incomparably noble. Long Chun couldn't help but frown. This so-called Senior Kong looked more like a rich landlord in the secular world, not at all like a disciple of the 5 great sections. The shirtless man in front of Long Chun and the 2 people in front of him saw that a crafting room was empty and hurriedly walked forward. But at this time, Senior Kong spoke. "You guys wait a little longer. These 3 cultivation rooms, I'll use them all." The 3 people who were about to enter the crafting room suddenly stopped, and their faces were extremely ugly. They had waited for so long, and now they saw that they were going to be used by someone else. How could they not be angry in their hearts? However, 2 of them quickly took a deep breath and retreated, respectfully nodding to Senior Kong. Only the bare-chested man in front of Long Chun stood there with an ashen face. He did not move at all. "Senior Brother Kong, I'm currently refining a mother-child sword. Noon is about to pass. If I don't start refining now, my efforts for the past half a year will go to waste. I wonder if..." The bare-chested man had a pleading look in his eyes. Everyone was enlightened when they heard this. A special material was needed to successfully forge the mother-child swords, the mother-child silver paste. Not only was this item priceless, if it was not added into a weapon within a short period of time, it would completely evaporate and become a pool of waste water. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Senior Brother Kong slowly walked towards the door of the refining room with a mocking smile on his face. "Ha!" Immediately after, a crisp sound rang in everyone's ears. Long Chun frowned deeply. He saw that the bare-chested man was directly sent flying a few meters, and Senior Kong had a mocking look on his face as he said, "What mother-child sword? It's just a pile of scrap iron. Even my two subordinates can forge better weapons than you." After he finished speaking, he and his two subordinates separately entered the 3 crafting rooms. Long Chin's eyes turned cold, and he was about to step forward. But he was pulled back by the bare-chested man, who helplessly shook his head. "You also wait. This Senior Kong is not someone you can afford to offend." The bare-chested man wiped the blood from his mouth and said to Long Chun. Seeing that the 3 people had already entered the crafting room, Long Chun shook his head and did not say anything more. After the 3 people entered the crafting room, Long Chun and the 3 people, including the bare-chested man, waited for a full 3 hours before the 3 crafting rooms appeared again. At this moment, the bare-chested man did not walk forward. Instead, he patted Long Chin's shoulder and said, "You go in first. My mother-child silver paste has already turned into ordinary silver liquid. The success rate of the mother-child sword is less than 1 in 100. The bare-chested man's words revealed his helplessness. In order to forge the mother-child sword, he had prepared for a full 6 months. Now, the most important material had been completely scrapped because of this sudden accident. "Who is this Senior Kong? Why are you so afraid of him?" Long Chun asked casually. Long Chun was a disciple of the Wanjian sect in his previous life, so he knew very little about the 100 Smelting Clan. As for the Senior Kong, he had never heard of him. The bare-chested man stared at Long Chun and said with a bitter smile, "Little brother, you just entered the 100 Smelting Clan, right? Within the 100 Smelting Clan, there are 3 paths: Talisman Incantation, Tool Refinement, and Pill Refinement. On this 100 Smelting Peak, there are 3 people who cannot be offended. One of them is this Kong Yu's blood brother, and also the person with the highest cultivation in the Tool Refinement Clan of the 100 Smelting Clan." Long Chun slightly nodded, but in his heart he disapproved and said indifferently, "Then what about the other 2 people who cannot be offended? They are also the people with the highest cultivation in the Talisman Incantation Clan and Pill Refinement Clan?" The bare-chested man replied, "It is indeed so. No matter if it is cultivation or refining skills, these 3 people are the people with the highest cultivation in their respective clans. Moreover, they are inextricably linked with the other large sections. They are absolutely not to be offended. Right? Perhaps there will be a change in the leader of the Pill clan. It is said that the Black Dragon Empire's Pill Pagoda will send over a genius of the Tao of Alchemy." Long Chun was startled, and then the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of smile. The Black Dragon Empire's Pill Pagoda, this so-called genius of the Tao of Alchemy, was probably Lu Yi. The Pill Pagoda's influence was enormous, and it also had a place in the 5 large sections. It was just that this Pill Pagoda had become a Pill Refinement Hall within the 100 Smelting Clan of the 5 large sections. Long Chun was clear about these things in his previous life. However, in his previous life, he did not care about the 100 Smelting Clan's matters. As for the Pill Pagoda, he knew even less. In his previous life, he only wholeheartedly wanted to increase his strength and take revenge. He truly missed out on too many things. If you trust me, then give the mother-child swords to me to try. If you only lack the item to fuse them, then perhaps I have a method that does not require the mother-child silver paste." Long Chun said to the bare-chested man. The bare-chested man was stunned at first. Then, he shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. "Without the mother-child silver paste, I am afraid that my mother-child swords will be useless in half a year. There is no harm in giving them to you. After saying this, the bare-chested man was very straightforward. He directly handed the mother-child swords over to Long Chun. However, he did not hold much hope in his heart. After all, without the mother-child silver paste, it was really somewhat impossible to refine the mother-child swords. Long Chun received the mother-child swords. He did not stand on ceremony and walked in front of the bare-chested man into the refining room. A primordial broken sword and a mother-child sword. The tool fusion stone should be enough. Long Chun muttered to himself. Chapter 199. The arrogant man inside the crafting room. Long Chun's golden dragon essence surged, and lines of carvings appeared on the weapon melting stone. Relying on his understanding of formations, Long Chun tried to restore the formations on the broken weapon. However, as he gradually understood all the formations on the broken weapon, his eyes lit up. This sword was indeed an inheritance from ancient times. The formations on it were ancient formations that had long been lost. If Long Chun did not have the Pill Dao inheritance from 10,000 years ago, no one would be able to recognize these formations, let alone restore them. Fortunately, this sword is not broken. It's just that the formations on it have all been destroyed, so it's like an ordinary iron sword. Long Chun muttered to himself. Formations were formed on the weapon melting stone, and each formation exuded an ancient aura. No matter which one of these formations was taken out, it would be enough to cause a sensation in the 100 Smelting clan. Because almost all of these formations have been lost, who would have thought that Long Chun would use the simplest spirit melting stone to restore the formation patterns on this broken ancient sword? As the weapon melting stones fell on the broken sword, they turned into ripples of flowing light that covered it. Gradually, lines of dazzling lines appeared on the broken sword like blood vessels. The sword, which was originally like scrap iron, seemed to be slowly showing signs of life. Long Chun gradually realized how extraordinary this weapon was. It wasn't as simple as he had imagined it to be. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Long Chun used almost 90% of the spirit melting stones to restore the formation. It had to be said that after Long Chun stepped into the soul transformation realm, his overall strength had increased by a lot. Originally, he could only barely inscribe king-level formations, but now he could easily do it. With the help of the formation inheritance and his powerful divine sense, everything seemed to be natural, and there was no sense of unfamiliarity. In 3 days, the sword in front of him had been restored to its original state, and the originally decayed formation patterns on it had been repaired by Long Chun. At this moment, the sword was cold all over, and the blade was completely gone. However, the faint chill that came from it made Long Chun tremble in fear. What level of Emperor level is this sword? Logically speaking, he should have surpassed the king rank. Unfortunately, Long Chun knew nothing about refining weapons. He could only vaguely feel that the level of this weapon was above the Emperor level. With a thought, Long Chun took out the hornless dragon sword. Although the sword was extremely heavy, after Long Chun obtained the dragon essence, it was unable to meet his requirements. Especially when he activated his bloodline power, the sword lost all its advantages in his hands. With a thought, Long Chun held a sword in each of his hands and started to attack each other. The two swords clashed. The sound of metal clashing did not come. Instead, there were 2 pieces of scrap metal on the ground, and the hornless dragon sword in Long Chun's hand actually broke into 2. Long Chun's eyes narrowed. He had never imagined that the edgeless sword would be so powerful. After all, the hornless dragon sword was a king-tier spiritual sword, and its core was its own weight and hardness. But now, it had been broken into 2 by his attack. This was simply inconceivable. Just as Long Chun was bewildered, a series of extremely complicated noises came from outside the refining room. Long Chun glanced at the mother-son swords that had been successfully refined by him with the traction formation on the stage. He no longer hesitated and turned to push the door open. Outside the door, the doors of countless refining rooms were all opened. Many people's expressions were extremely unsightly, and the center was Kong Yu. Kong Yu held a blue spike mace in his hand and the two manservants behind him also held a set of newly refined daggers in their hands. The three people's faces were full of arrogance and disdain. In front of them, there was a pile of broken swords and scrap metal. Are these the weapons you refined? All of them are simply scrap metal. They're even inferior to the daggers refined by my two attendants. Konyu held the blue spike mace in his hand and sneered loudly. Everyone in the crowd was incomparably livid. Finally, a young man could not stand it and rushed out and shouted, "Konyu, you've been cultivating in the high-grade refining room above the 100 refinement peak. Many elders have personally guided you for the sake of your brother. Why do you have to come down and humiliate us? Your blue spike mace was clearly refined by your brother to the 9th layer. You only sharpened it, but you used it to destroy all the weapons we refined. You've gone too far." Everyone shouted, but Konyu laughed even louder. He directly threw the first young man who spoke out and kicked him away. He said coldly, "So what? Look at what you refined. If it's not scrap metal, then what is it?" As Konyu spoke, he walked to the side of one of the refining rooms and snatched the weapon that had just been refined from one of the people. Then he waved the blue spike mace in his hand and smashed it into scrap metal. Long Chun had just walked out of the refining room. When he saw this scene, his face immediately darkened. Under his divine sense, he even discovered a few elders hiding in the dark. However, they turned a blind eye to this matter, as if they didn't want to come out and stop Konyu. However, Long Chun casually thought about it and guessed the reason. Each of the 5 great sects had its own peak. On the surface, they were united, but in fact, they were fighting openly and secretly. Within the 5 great peaks, fights could be fought at will. The 100 Smelting Sect had always been known for its lack of combat strength. However, because of its alchemy, refining tools, and charms, it had a place in the sect and had close ties with the disciples of the other sections. This was probably the reason why the so-called 3 of the 100 Smelting Sect couldn't be provoked. In his previous life, Long Chun was a genius disciple of the Wanjian sect. In the end, he became the direct disciple of the sect leader. He had some dealings with a direct disciple of the 100 Smelting Sect. It was also because of him that the direct disciple of the 100 Smelting Sect became an existence that no one dared to provoke. Long Chun thought this time, perhaps that person was also one of the 3 of the 100 Smelting Sect couldn't be provoked. While Long Chun was lost in thought, the shirtless man suddenly gently pulled his sleeve from behind and whispered, "Hurry up and leave." This Konyu relies on his brother's reputation to be arrogant and despotic. As long as no one dies, the sect elders won't interfere. Long Chun shook his head. Since the sect elder didn't want to interfere, he naturally didn't want to cause trouble. He turned around and handed the swords to the shirtless man. Then he planned to follow him down the stairs and leave this place. You actually succeeded in refining. How did you do it? Do you have the mother-child silver paste? No, it's a combination of arrays. The shirtless man looked at the swords in his hand and was inexplicably shocked. However, he also knew that this was not the time to talk. He turned around and led Long Chun out of the crowd. However, the moment he left the crowd, he was directly thrown out and the swords in his hand fell to the ground. In front of him, Konyu's right hand flashed and the blue spike wolf tooth mace moved in the air. Immediately after, another beam of light shot out. Boom! Boom! Chapter 200. Teach a lesson. The mother-child swords turned into iron shavings, while the half-naked man in front of Long Chun was sent flying away, crashing heavily against the mountain wall. Long Chun's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his face slowly turned cold. He originally didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but Konyu seemed to be a little too aggressive. Konyu stared mockingly at the bare-chested man who was sent flying by him. He stepped on the broken shards of the mother-child's sword and sneered. You want to leave? I've already said that your swords are trash. Long Chun looked at the shattered swords on the ground and said coldly, We are all from the same sect. Why do you have to go too far? When the people around heard Long Chun's words, they immediately gasped and subconsciously took a few steps back. Among them, There were even people who secretly thought that Long Chun did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Now is not the time to be reasonable. Kong Yu's pupils shrank as he stared at Long Chun. Who the hell are you? You don't look familiar. Are you a new disciple? I saw you just came out of the refining room. What kind of trash did you refine? Take it out and let me have a look. Kong Yu said mockingly as he walked towards Long Chun with the blue spike mace in his hand. His arrogance made Long Chun frown deeply. You want to see what kind of weapon I made? Long Chun sneered. Then I'll show you. Gotcha. As Long Chun's voice fell, a cold light suddenly flashed, and the mace in Kong Yu's hand was actually cut into two, and the cut was extremely smooth. Following this sword strike, the surroundings suddenly went silent, and everyone's eyes widened. F***, what's going on? This kid cut Kong Yu's green spiked mace into two with a single slash. The blue spiked mace was personally forged by Kong Jun. Although it was sharpened by Kong Yu, its quality is indeed 4th grade king rank. Breaking a 4th grade king level weapon with a single sword strike. This guy, what level of weapon is he holding? The surrounding people exclaimed as they stared at the sword in Long Chun's hand. Even Kong Yu was stunned for a moment. He never thought that Long Chun would dare to attack him, nor did he think that Long Chun would be able to cut the blue spiked mace in half. After a brief moment of stupefaction, Kong Yu's face gradually turned ashen. Then, with a chilling aura, he said in a deep voice, "Boy, you're just a beginner, so I won't bicker with you. If you give me this sword and kowtow to me twice, I'll let you follow me, and you'll have a promising future." The two attendants behind Kong Yu sneered at Long Chun, but they were already holding their swords in their hands, ready to strike at any time. In reality, Kong Yu's strength was far lower than most of the people present. He was only at the 4th level of the semi-god realm. If it weren't for the fact that he had Kong Jun as his elder brother, he would have died many times over. However, everyone knew that anyone who dared to make a move against Kong Yu would definitely die. In the past, there were people like Long Chun who attacked Kong Yu. The weaker ones were directly suppressed by Kong Jun and gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. Among them, there were a few people with extremely high cultivation who were not spared. They were challenged and killed by a few disciples of the Tombi sect. Since then, everyone knew that provoking Kong Yu was equivalent to making Kong Jun an enemy. Only death awaited them. Long Chun narrowed his eyes and stared at Kong Yu. You want me to give you the sword with both hands and kowtow to you? A murderous aura gradually emanated from Long Chun, and the surrounding people only felt the temperature drop a few degrees. Kong Yu also realized that Long Chun did not seem to be a servile person. He gradually retreated, and the two attendants behind him immediately rushed forward with their swords raised. Long Chun smiled coldly. He was very clear about the strength of the three people with his divine consciousness. Kong Yu was only at the middle stage of the semi-god realm, and the two attendants in front of him were only at the 7th level of the semi-god realm. They had just entered the late stage of the semi-god realm. There was no need to worry about them at all. Long Chun's feet swayed, and the long sword in his hand soared into the sky. Crack! The two sword moves were as fast as lightning, and spiritual light surged in the sky. However, in front of Long Chun, there were many loopholes. The long sword in his hand slashed directly on the two's weapons. Under the sword, the two's weapons were broken into several pieces. Bang! Long Chun quickly kicked the two in the chest. The two attendants in the late stage of the semi-god realm flew out like kites, and blood flowed out of their mouths. Their eyes were full of horror, and their hearts were filled with shock. Kong Yu took a few steps back, and the surrounding people also exclaimed, "When did the newcomers of the 100 Smelting Sect have such combat strength? This person's sword technique is also superb. Why didn't he enter the Wanjian sect but the 100 Smelting Sect?" He defeated two late-stage semi-god realm cultivators with one sword move, and his sword technique is as fast as lightning. Kong Yu is in big trouble this time. So what if he's strong? Have you forgotten the people who died in the Tombi sect? They were all in the late stage of the semi-god realm. Senior brother Kong Jun is said to be related to the personal disciples of the Tongbi sect. Let's not talk about the Tongbi sect. Senior brother Kong Jun seems to have reached the void return stage a year ago. Long Chun turned a deaf ear to the words around him. He slowly walked forward and gradually walked in front of Kong Yu. Chapter 201. Have I wronged you? Elders, please step aside. Long Chen's words caused the surrounding people to have strange expressions. Some even gave him a thumbs up in their hearts. As everyone knew, these elders had always been biased towards Kong Yu because of Kong Jun. Now that they had come out to protect Kong Yu, Long Chun pretended not to know. Please step aside. The faces of the elders turned ashen for a moment. One of them shook his head and said to Long Chun, "Kid, if I'm not wrong, you should be someone who has just entered the sect. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. We are helping you now. If you apologize to Kong Yu now, there might still be room for redemption." Long Chun shook his head and said, "Elders, you don't have to worry about me. However, if you continue to stop me, it's a bit unreasonable." At this time, the surrounding people also felt comfortable in their hearts. They looked at the weapons that had just been smashed by Kong Yu on the ground and were extremely angry. Elders, don't mess up the rules of the 5 major sections. Fighting within the sect does not harm one's life. Fighting within the sect must be on a challenge stage. Since this brother said that he would not harm his life, do the elders still want to interfere? Just now, we were humiliated to this extent and did not see the elders make a move. Now, you want to help? When did my 100 smelting sect fall to such a state? The surrounding people clamored crazily. The elders' faces became more and more unsightly, as black as the bottom of a pot. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, they could only slowly step aside. One of them snorted coldly, "Since you are courting death, don't blame us." After saying that, the elders left. Long Chin sneered and put away his long sword. Golden light flickered on his feet as he smashed down. Bang, bang, bang. Kong Yu's entire body was thrown away like a sandbag. Before he landed, he was kicked up again. Long Chin's every kick was just right. It was definitely not a place to take his life. However, the shrill cry caused everyone's scalps to go numb. At the same time, they cried out in joy in their hearts. This Kong Yu relied on Kong Jun's name to bully the outer sect disciples below the 100 refinement peak all year round. The elders' eyes couldn't help but twitch, but they could clearly see that Long Chin's attack wouldn't take Kong Yu's life. Oh no, he wants to cripple Kong Yu. The expressions of the elders changed abruptly, but before they could move, they were stopped in their tracks. Because under Long Chin's foot, Kong Yu had already fainted, and his dantian was surrounded by spiritual energy. This kick had directly shattered his dantian. The onlookers stared at Long Chun in horror. They never thought that Long Chun would dare to cripple Kong Yu in front of so many people. It was no different from killing him. Everyone knew that at this moment, things were already out of control. Afraid of getting into trouble, they slowly retreated, unwilling to stay here any longer. The 2 attendants who had just been sent flying by Long Chun saw this scene and broke out in cold sweat. They cried out involuntarily, You actually crippled Kong Yu? It's over. This time we're all dead because of you." Long Chun stared at the 2 and said coldly, "Take your master away. Otherwise, you can't blame me if he dies." The 2 of them didn't dare to hesitate. They carried the unconscious Kong Yu and rushed to the peak. Long Chun took a deep look at the elders of the 100 refinement sect and turned to walk down the peak. The shirtless man behind him didn't leave. Seeing Long Chun walk away, he quickly chased after him. "Brother, thank you." The shirtless man caught up with Long Chun in 2 steps and cupped his fists. Seeing that the man was so polite, Long Chun smiled and said, "My actions have nothing to do with you. It's just that that person went too far. It's a pity that your swords were destroyed right after you finished refining them. If you still have the materials, you can refine another one. When the time comes, just give it to me. No whiskers, mother-child silver paste." Long Chen's words made the shirtless man happy. He immediately cupped his fists again. Obviously, The sword were very important to him, so he didn't refuse. However, he said to Long Chun, "I still don't know brother's name." Long Chun, Fong Shan. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. As they talked, they walked down the mountain. "Brother Fong Shan, aren't you afraid that you'll be implicated if you travel with me?" Long Chun joked. Fong Shan had a silly smile on his face as he said, "You helped me refine the swords, and I already owe you a favor. I originally wanted to take you away, but I caused this trouble. Why would I be afraid of being implicated?" After Fong Shan finished speaking, he said with a serious face, "However, you were really reckless today. I'm afraid that you won't be able to rest in peace. It's best if you stay in the sect and don't go to the 100 Refinement Peak." Longchen didn't comment, but he still nodded his head. The two of them walked down the 100 Refinement Peak. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, they saw the Wind Marquis and Jianshi San. When Fong Shan saw the two of them, he was stunned. Then he suddenly realized and said, Could it be that you're the top 3 disciples on the Immortal Ascension Road?" Long Chun smiled and nodded his head. The Wind Marquis slightly knit his brows when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. Only his attitude towards Long Chun seemed to have changed as he said in a deep voice, "It seems like I really misunderstood you 2 days ago." Fong Shan and Long Chun slowly walked over. When Fong Shan saw Jianshi San, he unconsciously took 2 steps back. He felt as if there were needles on his back, and a chill ran down his spine. Jianshi San was wearing hemp clothes with a long sword on his back. He was sitting cross-legged with no spiritual energy fluctuations around him, but it made Fong Shan's heart skip a beat. What's wrong with this person? Why does it feel like he's a sharp sword just by sitting here? Fong Shan was shocked. The Wind Marquis slightly nodded his head and took a deep look at Long Chun. Originally, he had a deep killing intent towards Long Chun, but now it had gradually faded. It seemed like Long Chun really had the intention to cultivate Jianshi San, and from what he saw today, he really did have the ability to do so. He wasn't as bad as the Wanjian sect said. "Oh, you're awake. It seems like you haven't been awake for long." Long Chen's brows jumped as he stared at Jianshi San and spoke in a light voice. As his voice fell, Jianshi San's eyes suddenly opened, and an almost material sword light flashed past. The sharp sword intent all over his body spread out with a loud bang, causing Fong Shan to take a few steps back. Jianshi San slowly stood up, and his eyes immediately fell onto Long Chun. At this moment, his view of Long Chun had completely changed. Long Chun stared at Jianshi San, and his lips curled into a smile as he said in a light voice, "How is it? Is it wrong for you to be my disciple?" Long Chun's heart was filled with emotions. In his previous life, he had been the ruler of the world, and his sword arts had reached the heavens. There were many geniuses in the world that wanted to become his disciple, but they were all rejected by him one by one. But now he had accepted a disciple in the soul transformation realm, Jianshi San. Chapter 202. The eldest disciple Jianshi San stared at Long Chun. A look of struggle flashed across his face, as if he was making a decision in his heart. The Marquis stared at Jianshi San without saying a word. He and Jianshi San were like brothers, if not for the fact that Jianshi San had once risked his life to save him. The Marquis would have died in the mountains and wouldn't be able to talk about his current glory. No matter what Jianshi San did, the Marquis would definitely support him. After a long while, Jianshi San finally spoke. He slowly walked in front of Long Chun, unsheathing the sword on his back with a clang, both hands holding the blade. He immediately knelt down on one knee. The Marquis' pupils suddenly shrank, and he said in a serious voice, 13, "Have you really thought it through? You want to be this youth's disciple?" Fong Shan, who was walking with Long Chun, was also completely stunned. His heart was speechless to the extreme. Even if he was an idiot, he could see that Jianshi San's cultivation base was extremely high and his battle strength was not low. But such an expert actually wanted to be this youth's disciple. This was one of the 5 great sects. There were so many elders and experts. There were even Dao integration stage experts. And he actually chose to be this youth's disciple. Although Long Chen's age and battle strength could be called a heaven-gifted genius, but to be this youth's disciple wasn't a bit difficult. Fang Shan's heart was filled with doubts. He just couldn't understand. On the contrary, when Jian Shisan heard the Marquis words, he said in a deep voice, "I've been pursuing the Tao of the sword my whole life. I entered the mountains with a sword at the age of 5. I comprehended sword intent at the age of 10. All my sword techniques have reached perfection. I'm called a sword genius." He paused, his face filled with awe. He looked at Long Chun. Then he slowly said, "But I know, in my entire life, I'm afraid I'll only be able to reach the Tao integration stage. I comprehended sword intent at the age of 10, but now that I'm a youth, I've only comprehended 3 sword intents, and only one of them has reached the limit, comprehending sword force. But now, this one seat is worth 10 years of my cultivation." When he spoke up to hear, Sword 13's eyes seemed to have flames flickering as he stared fixedly at Long Chun. When the Wind Marquis and Fang Shan on the side heard his final words, their minds were filled with explosions as they sucked in a cold breath. A single sitting was worth 10 years of hard work. Could it be that this was all because of the young Long Chun in front of him? Was this really possible? The two of them stared at Long Chen's calm appearance. Only then did they feel that Long Chun was like a pool of ancient water, unfathomable. The Wind Marquis knew that Jian Shisan would not lie, and the only reason he could become Long Chen's disciple was Sword Tao. The Sword Tao that he had been pursuing all his life was a Sword Tao that he was willing to sacrifice his life to defend. The Marquis of Wind shook his head and gave a sigh. He knew that once Jian Shisan made a decision, it would be impossible to change it. Just like how he was dressed in hemp clothes and had a long sword on his back, he had been here for 10 years. Ever since he left the mountain, he had not changed. Long Chun reached out his finger and tapped the sword 3 times with his fingertips. The gentle sound was like the sound of a zither. Then Long Chun softly said, "Stand up. Since you have become my disciple today, the path of glory is beneath your feet." Long Chen's words were filled with an unprecedented confidence, as if he was telling the truth. When they heard Long Chen's words, they felt an unprecedented arrogance and pride. If they heard these words in the past, they would have just laughed and treated it as nothing. But today they did not know why they did not have a trace of doubt. It was as if the youth in front of them could really do it. "You guys can chat first. This is my cave dwelling's doorplate. If you have the chance, you can come find me for a drink. It can be considered a friend." Fang Zheng fiercely shook his head. He felt that the 3 people in front of him were not normal people. They had some insight, so he directly said these words to leave. Long Chun nodded his head. He took Fang Zheng's doorplate and said, "The 3 of us have not been assigned a cave dwelling yet. When we have a place to stay, we will come find you. You should prepare the mother and son swords." Hearing Long Chen's words, Fang Zheng repeatedly thanked him. He felt that he had met a noble person today. Seeing Fang Zheng leave, Long Chen stared at Jian Shisan and said, "Since you have become my disciple, I will teach you 3 sword techniques today. Although you have not used them, I know that your strongest sword intent is the aged metal sword. It is only a step away from perfection. Today, I will teach you a sword technique. Purple Gold Heaven Suppressing Sword Technique. You still have 2 sword intents. Although I have used my divine sense to help you comprehend them, it is still not enough. I will teach you Wind and Fire Cloud Breaking Sword Technique. It can help you condense your sword intent as quickly as possible. The third one is a secret technique that can save your life. It is not to be used unless you are in a life and death situation. It is called the Sword Transforming 3 Chi Technique. Long Chen's words fell into Jian Shisan's ears. Jian Shisan listened respectfully, and his reverence for Long Chen grew. It must be known that he had never used the Gung metal sword will. It was his trump card, but Long Chen had seen through it. As Long Chen's voice fell, his fingertips once again fell on Jian Shisan's forehead. "Today, you are my eldest disciple. If you follow your heart, I will help you conquer the 10 heavens and pursue the pinnacle of heaven. In the future, If you have the intention to betray me, you will suffer the pain of 10,000 swords piercing your bones, and you will fall into the path of reincarnation forever." Jian San suddenly knelt down. His mind seemed to be filled with the thunder of the evening drum and morning bell. Long Chen's words were like a deep imprint in his soul. Perhaps he did not know that from this moment onwards, his life would completely change. Marquis Feng did not hear Long Chen's words, but when he saw Jian San kneel down on both knees, his heart was filled with incomparable shock. This meant that from this moment onwards, Long Chen was like a father to him. Long Chen's fingertips slowly left Jian San's forehead, and a faint smile hung on his lips. Jian San bit the tip of his tongue and suddenly woke up from his stupor. When he saw Long Chen, he unconsciously took a step back. Only now did he realize how childish he was when he competed with Long Chen. "Thank you, Master, for the 3 sword techniques. 13 is definitely not as good as Master's name," Jian San said respectfully in a deep voice. Long Chen nodded his head. When he was about to speak, Elder Su Fu, who had received them since the beginning of the Immortal Ascension path, anxiously walked over and stared at Long Chen from afar. Marquis Feng and Jian San could not help feeling a little confused when they saw this, but Long Chen had a playful smile on his face. Elder Su Fu was so angry that his beard trembled. He pointed at Long Chen and said, "Didn't I tell you to stay here for the next few days? Why did you cause so much trouble when I just left?" Long Chen said with a faint smile, "What kind of trouble? Elder, you said. I didn't cause any trouble." Chapter 203. Sword Art's Big Trouble. Crippling Kong Jun's little brother Kong Yu, Jian San, and the Wind Marquis both had blank faces. They never would have thought that Long Chen, who had just arrived at the 100 Smelting Clan, would have offended such an incredible person. Elder is thinking too much. This is not considered troublesome. Rather, it is Kong Jun who is troublesome, isn't it? Long Chen had a smile on his face the entire time, as if he was in a good mood because he had accepted Jian San as a disciple. Su Fu looked at Long Chen's appearance and felt that he had nowhere to vent his anger. Finally, he gave a cold snort and flicked his sleeve. "This is your cave residence token. I have already reported it for you. Also, starting tomorrow, you'll head to the peak to participate in alchemy and array cultivation. As for the 2 of them, they will become inner sect disciples, and their cultivation resources will be doubled." Long Chen took the token and secretly thought that choosing the 100 Smelting Clan was the right choice. Just based on the resources given to Jian San and the Wind Marquis, one could see this. After Su Fu handed over the 3 tokens, he glared at Long Chen and left. Long Chen smiled and brought the 2 of them to the peak. Perhaps Elder Su Fu did it on purpose. Their cave residences were on the 15th floor of the Mountain Wind Mountain, and they were all adjacent to each other. The cave residences were actually caves opened up by the 100 Smelting Clan, but they were reinforced with spatial arrays. Just like the cave in front of Long Chen, they covered the entire 100 Smelting Peak. Moreover, they also discovered that the closer they were to the peak, the higher their status was. Under normal circumstances, those who had just entered the sect were called outer sect disciples and were all below the 5th floor. However, Long Chen's group of 3 had directly reached the 15th floor, which was enough to see how important the 100 Smelting Clan was to them. "Master, who is that Kong Jun? Why does the 100 Smelting Clan elder seem to be afraid of him?" Jian San casually asked Long Chen. Long Chen replied, "Among the 5 major sects, the 100 Smelting Clan is the weakest in terms of combat power. However, they possess the most resources among the 5 major sects. In fact, they are an absolutely indispensable part of the 5 major sects. And this Kong Jun is the #1 person among the younger generation of the 100 Smelting Sect's weapon refining faction. He is also a direct disciple. However, even so, his cultivation is probably only at the Void Return realm. According to the combat strength of the 2 of you, it is not impossible to fight him if you go all out." Jian San frowned upon hearing this. a return to void stage cultivator can have such status? This is also what I'm going to say next. In the 100 Smelting Clan, the real strength is not cultivation, but refining weapons, refining pills, and even charms. Long Chun continued. The Wind Marquis gave a slight nod. Compared to Jian Shisan's honesty, he was much wiser. Long Chen's short words had allowed him to discern the pros and cons. You're saying that the 100 Smelting Clan uses alchemy, charms, and weapons to create a mutually beneficial relationship with the other sections. For example, they provide pills and they provide battle strength. This is similar to a contractual relationship. The Wind Marquis words hit the nail on the head. Longchen gave a slight nod. You don't need to worry too much. Although the strength of the other 4 major sects far surpasses the 100 Smelting Clan, your battle strength should be equivalent to an inner core disciple. There shouldn't be anyone looking for trouble in a short period of time. Long Chun said. Although he said this, Long Chen knew that in the next few days, because of Kong Yu, they would be in a lot of trouble. After all, Kong Jun had a high status in the 100 Smelting Clan, and his little brother Kong Yu had been crippled by Long Chun in front of everyone. After the 3 of them talked for a short while, Long Chun turned around and entered the cave. Jian Shisan and the Wind Marquis looked at each other before walking into the same cave. The cave's barrier closed. The Wind Marquis stared at Jian Shisan and said in a serious voice, "Who is this child? Does he really have the ability you speak of? Are you really willing to follow him for 10 years?" Jian Shisan stared at the Wind Marquis. He remembered what Long Chun had said to him, and his eyes lit up. Finally, he shook his head and firmly said, "It's not 10 years, it's a lifetime." The Wind Marquis was stunned and said in a deep voice, "You're saying that you want to follow this youth for your entire life?" Jian Shisan nodded his head heavily. His eyes flickered like stars as he stared at the Wind Marquis and said, "Perhaps you still have many things you don't understand about Master, but I can tell you, perhaps this is the greatest opportunity of my life." Jian Shisan said this, and a spiritual glow appeared in his hand as he unsheathed his sword. Sword intent appeared on his sword and began to wreak havoc in the cave. After a while, the Wind Marquis was stunned as he said in a lost voice, This is the sword technique he taught you?" Jian Shisan slowly nodded and could see the Wind Marquis shock. This was a 6th grade Emperor level sword technique, and both sword techniques were at the Emperor level. It would be fine if it were just Emperor grade sword techniques, since the 10,000 Swords sect doesn't lack them. But do you know, these 2 sword techniques complement my current sword Dao cultivation and are the most suitable sword techniques for me right now. Jian Shisan looked at the sword in his hand as he explained. The Wind Marquis expression became more serious. He had a clear mind and naturally knew how powerful these sword techniques were. These 2 sword techniques were almost made for him, and it was enough to see that these 2 Emperor-level sword techniques were nothing in Long Chen's hands. Moreover, even if it was the head of the Wanjian sect of the 5 great sects, it would be impossible for him to be this confident in Jian Shisan's sword cultivation and give him sword techniques at the same time. Seeing the Wind Marquis knit his brows, Jian Shisan spoke again. This time his voice was trembling as he said, "Master also gave me a secret technique that can be used to save my life. Its grade is very likely to surpass the Emperor level." The Wind Marquis expression changed at this moment, and he couldn't help taking a step back. He said in a voice that lost his voice, You're talking about a god-level life-saving secret technique." The Wind Marquis words came to an abrupt stop. Seeing Jian Shisan nod his head with a serious expression, he finally revealed a bitter smile. At this moment, he knew just how wise the Big Dry Empire's Emperor's orders were. A divine skill was considered rare in the 5 great sects, but they could still take it out. However, a god-level secret technique was something that the 5 great sects might not even have a single one of. I'm going back first. These sword techniques are simply made for me, and I'm afraid I'll reach the perfection realm in just a few months. Jian Shisan was filled with confidence as he prepared to leave the cave. Before he left, he turned around and said to the Wind Marquis, "If there's a chance, you should also become Master's disciple." He is not someone you and I can predict, and is not someone the 5 great sects can trap." After saying this, Jian Shisan turned around and left. His mind was still thinking about Long Chen's words. One day, he would really be able to conquer the legendary 10 Heavens domain. Chapter 204. A trip to the peak in the blink of an eye. Long Chen's group had already been in the 100 Smelting Clan for several days. They had a good understanding of the various rules and areas of the 100 Smelting Clan. At noon that day, the mountain wind blew and the sun was high in the sky. Everyone walked out of the cave. The Wind Marquis and Jian Shisan cupped their fists to Long Chen. These past few days, Long Chen had guided them in their cultivation. Jian Shisan's cultivation had improved once again, and even the Wind Marquis was now filled with respect for Long Chen. Long Chen's understanding of cultivation and martial skills far surpassed the two of them. Just a few words from him could enlighten the two of them. Today is the middle of the month, and is also the day the 100 Smelting Clan receives their resources. 2 days ago, Fang Shan sent the mother and son swords to me as well. Long Chen said to the two of them. Jian Shisan and the Wind Marquis nodded, and the 3 of them walked up the mountain. The 33rd floor of the 100 Smelting Peak was already packed with people. This time of the month was the busiest time of the month. After Long Chen's group arrived, they walked behind the crowd and formed a long line. Long Chen released his divine sense and investigated a bit, but he did not find Fang Shan's figure. He could only keep the mother and son swords that he wanted to give him. Time passed by minute, and the crowd gradually decreased. After Long Chen's group received their resources, Long Chen's face became gloomy, and he said in a deep voice, "Let's go to Fang Shan's cave to take a look." Long Chen's heart had a bad premonition. When he was receiving his resources, he used his divine sense to investigate and found that no one had received Fang Shan's resources today. This meant that Fang Shan had not reached the 33rd floor today. The Wind Marquis seemed to have noticed Long Chen's worry, and he and Jian Shisan sped up. When they arrived at Fang Shan's cave, their faces gradually became gloomy. At Fang Shan's entrance, 3 gloomy-looking men were standing in front of him. The grass under their feet was dyed red with blood. At the end of the pool of blood, Fang Shan's body was in a mess. Bloody foam kept flowing out of his mouth. Just as Long Chen and the other 2 approached, the 3 gloomy men walked out with cold smiles. The man in the lead with a sunken nose stared at Long Chen and said, "We've been waiting for you for a long time. Today, I represent Senior Kong Jun to pass on a message to you." As the man spoke, he stepped on Fang Shan's chest, who was already lying on the ground, and twisted it twice. Fang Shan immediately let out a shrill scream. When Long Chen saw this, he felt a chill in his heart. The 3 of them looked at Long Chen and said, "Senior brother Kong Jun said that as long as you hand over the sword that cut the green spike mace in half with both hands and crawl in front of him on your knees, he will not pursue the past." The corners of Long Chen's mouth curled into a sinister smile as he said to Jian Shisan in a deep voice, "Cripple all 3 of them for me." When the 3 of them heard this, they were stunned for a moment before their faces turned incomparably gloomy. They said in a deep voice, "Since you refuse a toast, we'll make you drink a forfeit." However, what answered them was a long sword. After Long Chen gave the order, Jian Shisan rushed out. At the same time, Marquis Feng also moved. The sword's shadows were dazzling. When the attacks collided, it brought about gusts of wind, causing a huge commotion. It was unknown when Long Chen had already rescued Fang Shan from the attacks of the 3 people. Several pills appeared in his hand, and he threw them into Fang Shan's mouth. However, his face immediately turned incomparably ugly. This was because Fang Shan's dantian was completely shattered, and his qi was also incomparably damaged. "This matter, I've harmed you." Long Chen stared at Fang Shan and said in a deep voice. Fang Shan's face was as white as paper, and blood kept flowing out of his mouth. However, he raised his eyebrows and revealed an extremely ugly smile as he replied, "It has nothing to do with brother Long Chen." Bang bang. Jian Shisan's sword technique was like a tide. Relying on his small success emperor-level sword technique, he suppressed the people in front of him. As for Marquis Fong, he released the power of his bloodline. However, the two of them did not look good. This was because although the three of them were only in the late soul formation stage, their battle strength was very strong. On one hand, it was because of their weapons. On the other hand, it was because they had many talismans and pills in their hands. These things greatly increased their battle strength in many aspects, making them very difficult to deal with. This is the guy who crippled Kong Yu. I never thought that Kong Jun would make a move so quickly. The battle strength of the three Liao brothers is not bad, but they were forced to use pills and talismans by a few new outer disciples. This is really rare. You don't know this, but these three people are the top 3 of the heaven ranking of the 9 empires. So what if they're in the top 3 of the heaven ranking? They're just a joke in the 5 great sections. They should never have provoked brother Kong Jun. More and more people came out of the cave dwellings. Seeing Jian Shi-san and Marquis Fong fighting the 3 Liao brothers, they could not help but discuss. Pung pung pung. The 3 people in front of Jian Shi-san became more and more shocked as they fought. Jian Shi-san and Marquis Feng's battle strength had far surpassed their imaginations, especially Jian Shi-san, who made them tremble with fear. The sharpness of his sword arts was already comparable to that of the inner disciples of the Wanjian sect. His sword arts were especially high-grade and mysterious. The 3 of them retreated as they fought. They actually had the intention to retreat, as if they knew that they would not be able to gain any advantage here. However, Long Chen had appeared behind them at an unknown time, blocking their path of retreat. With a single slash of his sword, the 3 of them were forced to retreat. The 3 of them were incomparably shocked. They never thought that Long Chen's sword arts would be above Jian Shi-san's. Only now did they realize that they had kicked an iron plate today. Jian Shi-san and Marquis Fong grasped this opportunity and knocked one of them to the ground, causing blood to flow out of his mouth. Following this person's defeat, the other 2 could no longer hold on. The 3 of them lay on the ground, staring at the dragon chariot. The 3 of them had ugly expressions as they said in a deep voice, "You really want to break off relations with senior brother Kong Jun. The 3 of us came here today to give you a warning. If you continue to be stubborn, the experts of the Long Arm sect will come here to challenge you. At that time, it won't be as simple as it is now. You might even lose your lives." The 3 of them fell to the ground. Looking at Long Chen's group, their faces were incomparably pale. They had come here directly after receiving Kong Jun's orders. They thought that they were just outer sect disciples who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, but they never would have thought that the people in front of them would be this strong. Long Chen stared at the 3 of them and said to Jian Shi-san in a deep voice, "Cripple them for me. Just leave them with a single breath." Jian Shi-san nodded and gave a cold snort. His feet fiercely stomped on the dantian of the 3 of them. In the past few days, he had become quite familiar with Fong Shan. It could be said that this person was their first friend in the 100 Smelting sect, but now he had fallen into this situation because of them. Even Jian Shi-san's heart was filled with killing intent at this moment. Following the shrill cries of the 3 of them, the people in the cave all stared at Long Chen's group in shock. They quickly retreated, afraid that they would cause trouble. You all are seeking death." Chapter 205. Core disciple Marquis Feng Qing brought Fong Shan back to the cave, while Long Chun and Jian Shi-san headed straight for the peak. Long Chun and Jian Shi-san's faces turned cold. The 2 of them quickly arrived at the peak. However, Kong Jun was not at the 73rd level of the cave residence. Long Chen's divine sense spread out in an instant, and he quickly observed the abnormality of the few levels near the peak. Most of the people in the entire 100 Refinement Peaks high-level cave residence group were actually gathering towards the 93rd level. Let's go to the 93rd level to take a look. Jian Shi-san walked behind Long Chun. He was now Long Chen's right-hand man. The 100 Refinement Peak had a total of 99 levels. The higher the level of the cave residence group, the stronger the status and strength. Kong Jun's cave residence on the 73rd level was enough to show his status in the 100 refinement peak. Under normal circumstances, the lower 30 levels were where the outer disciples lived, while the 30th and 60th levels were where the inner disciples lived. Above the 60th level were where the core disciples and many elders lived. The two of them continued to move forward. As they gradually approached the 93rd level of the cave residence group, the crowd slowly increased. Everyone's cultivation was not low, and they were wearing the core disciples' waist token. Long Chun and Jian San walked through the crowd and quickly attracted everyone's attention. What's going on with these two people? They clearly have the inner disciples' waist token. Why did they come to the peak? This time, Senior Kong Jun and Zhang Yishan, who is ranked in the top 10 of the Tongbi Sect's core disciples. Are they refining the Redbud Spear? Could it be that these two fellows also want to watch? What can two inner disciples see? I'm afraid they will be kicked out by the core disciples who are in charge of order later. They will be taught a lesson. The crowd's voices entered Long Chen's ears, and he immediately revealed a cold smile. As expected, Kong Jun was here. On the huge platform of the 93rd level of the cave residence group, there was an open-air refining area. At this moment, there was only one place in the entire refining area, and the others were all empty. However, outside the platform square, layers of core disciples surrounded and looked inside. Because of the large number of people, there were even many core disciples here to maintain order. The one wearing the black robe with golden patterns is the core disciple of the Tongbi sect. Zhang Yishan? What a terrifying aura. It's him. It's said that he's looking for senior brother Kong Jun to refine a 3rd grade king rank spear so that he could become a core disciple. Senior brother Kong Jun's refining skills are not low. If we can help Zhang Yishan become a core disciple this time, it will definitely be of great benefit to him. The surrounding people discussed animatedly. The man standing at the side of the refining table was wearing a black robe with golden patterns. He was tall and thin, like a long-armed demon ape, giving people a great pressure. His eyes were fixed on Kong Jun, who was in the center. Kong Jun held an 8-foot-long spear in his hand, and the iron hammer in his hand constantly fell down. The surrounding spirit light rippled with his hammer strikes, and an ear-piercing rumble sounded. How much longer? Zhang Yishan's eyes were filled with anticipation. Kong Jun stared at the pike in his hand and replied in a deep voice. There's still one last step to complete. I've already left out the array patterns and veins within it. You can go look for the elder from the Talisman faction or that fellow Wujio. You just have to add in the required array. Hearing this, Zhang Yishan nodded. At this moment, Long Chun and Jian San finally walked through the crowd and arrived at the square. Jian San's body exuded a shocking chill, causing the people around to subconsciously distance themselves from him. On the contrary, Long Chen's expression did not change from the beginning to the end. He just stared at Kong Jun, who was refining from a distance. Because of Jian San's aura, the disciples who maintained order around quickly discovered the two of them. A few core disciples who were close to them quickly frowned and walked over. When a few core disciples found Jian San and Long Chen's inner disciple waist token, one of them immediately shouted, "This is the 93rd floor of the 100 refining peak. Only core disciples can come up. Get out of here." Long Chun and Sword 13 hadn't spoken when another core disciple at the side cried out, "I've seen these 3 people before. What inner court disciple? They're just fellows that just entered the sect. At most, they could be considered outer court disciples. It's just that the elders issued the inner court disciples waist token." What? They're outer disciples who just walked through the immortal path and entered the sect. Do they know how many floors this is? Even inner disciples can't casually come up. They're courting death. A few core disciples who maintained order stared at Long Chun and the others. Their expressions gradually became unfriendly and were full of sneers. Long Chun stared at them and said faintly, "Go and tell Kong Jun that Long Chun came to look for him." A few people who were about to attack Long Chun and Jian San suddenly stopped. They secretly thought that Long Chun actually came to look for senior brother Kong Jun. They did not dare to delay and turned to walk toward Kong Jun, who was refining. Kong Jun, who was originally hammering the weapon, suddenly stopped and looked at Long Chun from afar. Bang! As the last hammer fell, Kong Jun sighed and said to Zhang Yishan, "This spear has been refined. Wait a moment for the pig iron to cool down." Zhang Yishan nodded and saw Kong Jun walk toward Long Chun and Jian Shisan. The surrounding people subconsciously retreated to both sides. "Didn't I tell you to crawl up on your knees? Why are you crawling up?" Kong Jun just approached Long Chun and Jian Shisan and shouted in a deep voice. Hearing this, Jian Shisan's long sword trembled and his heart was filled with anger. Long Chun took a step forward and said, "You let those 3 people cripple Fang Shan to warn me. You want the sword in my hand." Long Chun's hand moved, and the ancient sword appeared in front of everyone. As soon as the sword appeared, Kong Jun's pupils suddenly shrank, and he said in a deep voice, "You used this sword to cut the blue spike mace in half? Very well, as long as you give this sword to me and kowtow and admit your mistake, I won't pursue this matter when Kong Yu comes." "Ha! You really think you're a big shot?" Hearing this, Long Chun moved the long sword in his hand, and his sword light fell straight toward Kong Jun. Kong Jun's expression changed, and his aura suddenly surged. A long saber appeared, and with a move of his fingers, it flew in the air and shattered Long Chun's attack. Seeing this, Zhang Yishan could not help but frown and said in a deep voice, "Do you need me to do it?" Kong Jun's face turned pale, and he said in a cold voice, "They're just 2 newcomers who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Kong Jun did not intend to let Zhang Yishan do it. He was an expert of the void return stage. Seeing that Long Chun and Jian Shisan were both in the divine transformation stage, he was naturally not afraid. "It's said that you're all seated contestants on the path of immortality. Even the sect elders want to promote you. But today, I want you to become completely useless." Kong Jun said in a cold voice, "Cripple these 2 for me." Chapter 206. Arranged Battle. Originally, many of the core disciples had come to watch Kong Jun refine a king-grade weapon for Zhang Yishan, hoping to gain some enlightenment from it. Who would have thought that someone would come and disrupt the situation? And the person who had disrupted the situation was actually a newcomer who had just joined the 100 Smelting Clan a few days ago. Although it was rumored that the 100 Smelting Clan had taken in 3 of the top 3 disciples on the heaven list, this was too arrogant. The person in front of them was the leader of the Weapon Refining Clan's core disciples, Kong Jun, and behind him were many core disciples of the Tongbi clan. Following Kong Jun's command, more than 10 core disciples slowly surrounded Long Chun and Jian Shisan. Long Chun glanced at the crowd and said indifferently, "Your sword techniques and sword intent have improved a little these days. Can you deal with 5 of them?" Jian Shisan held his sword and said in a deep voice, 6. Long Chun smiled and nodded. The faces of the core disciples who were walking over all darkened. At this time, the 2 of them were actually discussing how to defeat them. Arrogant. A core disciple rushed toward Long Chun as soon as he finished speaking. This person was at the peak of the soul formation late stage. On the other side, Jian Shisan was even more impatient and rushed directly into the crowd. In an instant, the entire platform on the 93rd floor was filled with sword light. Bang, bang, bang. The 3 people who were rushing toward Long Chun were all sent flying in just a few breaths. The remaining people stared at Long Chun in horror as they retreated. Then, they turned around and rushed toward Jian Shisan, who was slightly weaker in terms of combat strength. Kong Jun's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw this scene. Long Chun's combat strength just now was far from what the divine transformation realm could compare with, especially when coupled with a long sword in his hand. Anyone who went against him would be able to break their weapon with 1 strike. It was really terrifying. Your 100 Smelting Clan's combat techniques are really not good. You can't even take down 2 soul formation stage cultivators. You're a disgrace to the 5 great sects. Just as the core disciples were about to collapse, Zhang Yishan slowly walked toward Kong Jun. His divine beast picked up the spear that he had just refined and turned into a rainbow and rushed out. This person was actually at the void return stage. Bang! Zhang Yishan's speed was extremely fast, and he arrived at Jian Shisan's side in an instant. The spear in his hand moved, and a spirit light that seemed to be able to topple mountains and overturn seas shot out. Everyone in all directions felt a terrifying aura. Airwaves shot out in all directions. The long sword in Sword 13's hand actually slipped out of his hand, and his chest was forcefully kicked. Jian Shisan's face suddenly turned deathly pale. His entire body was thrown out and heavily crashed into the ground, leaving behind a deep drag mark. The surrounding people couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The strength of a core disciple of the Tongbai sect was incomparable to Yuan Fei's 100 Smelting Clan, not to mention that Zhang Yishan was about to become a direct disciple. Long Chen's eyes narrowed as he held the long sword in his hand. He said coldly, "The Void Return Realm?" Zhang Yishan sneered as he stared at the sword in Long Chen's hand and said indifferently, "The sword in your hand is not bad. If you give it to me, perhaps I won't interfere today. You want the sword in my hand? Let's see if you have the qualifications." Long Chen blocked Jian Shisan behind him. "Both of you stop right now." Just as the two of them were about to attack, a low and deep voice sounded, and the two of them stopped. Immediately after, the long-bearded elder, Su Fu, walked out from behind the crowd with a gloomy expression on his face. "Zhang Yishan, do you want to die in my 100 Smelting Clan?" Elder Su Fu's voice was cold as he looked at Zhang Yishan with eyes as sharp as knives. Zhang Yishan's body trembled as he hurriedly replied, "I wouldn't dare. Please don't blame me, Elder. We are not from the same sect, so if you want to fight, you have to fight on the battle stage. You're already at the Void Return stage, yet you dare to attack a disciple of my sect who is at the Soul Formation stage. You're quite ambitious," Su Fu said in a low voice. After being scolded by this elder, Zhang Yishan didn't dare to talk back at all. Instead, it was Kong Jun who stood up at this time. He bowed and said, "Elder Su Fu, you're too serious." Zhang Yishan was just being impulsive. It's just that these two new disciples are too arrogant. They really need to be taught a lesson. Su Fu frowned as he looked deeply at Long Chun and Jian Shisan. He never thought that Long Chun and Jian Shisan would rush to the peak of the mountain and personally come to find trouble with Kong Jun. Moreover, it had developed to such a stage. Zhang Yishan saw Su Fu glare at him fiercely and signaled him to go down the mountain. He didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. Before he left, he looked at Long Chun and Jian Shisan and said indifferently, "The two of you can only show off your strength in the 100 Smelting Clan. If you were my Tongbi clan, you would have been crippled long ago. If you have the guts, come to the battle stage one day. I can fight the two of you alone." Zhang Yishan's face was full of disdain as he spoke and was about to walk down the stairs. At this moment, Long Chun suddenly called out to him and said in a deep voice, 10 days later, on the battle stage, I will definitely go to your Tongbi clan." As soon as Long Chun said this, there was an uproar in all directions. He actually wanted to challenge Zhang Yishan to the battle stage. Zhang Yishan, who was walking down the stairs, suddenly stopped and then laughed loudly. "Since you want to die, I will naturally fulfill your wish. When the time comes, the Tongbi clan will wait for you. I hope you won't go back on your words." After saying this, Zhang Yishan flicked his sleeves and left. The surrounding people, however, began to talk. Is this person an idiot? He actually wants to challenge Zhang Yishan? Zhang Yishan has already reached the origin returning stage and is about to become a direct disciple. He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sooner or later, he won't even know how he died. 10 days later, he will regret his arrogant words today. Hearing the surrounding people's words, Elder Su Fu couldn't help but walk in front of Long Chun and say in a deep voice, "Are you crazy? Can't you just let this matter go? You insist on challenging this person on the battle stage. With your talent, you can definitely become an outstanding talisman master or alchemist in the future. If because of this..." Long Chun waved his hand and said, "Elder, please don't worry. I will definitely not humiliate the sect. However, I have some matters to settle with Kong Jun right now. Su Fu asked what matters. Long Chun helped Jian Shursen up and turned to look at Kong Jun, saying in a cold voice, "Today, I am here to cripple someone." On the other side, Kong Jun's expression darkened, and he said angrily, "If you want to die, I will send you on your way today." Su Fu's expression suddenly darkened, and he shouted, "Nonsense! This is the 100 Smelting Sect, not the Wanjian Sect or the Tombi clan. This is not a competition of battle strength. If the two of you want to compete, then compete in tool refinement, pill identification, and talisman incantation." As Su Fu spoke, his entire body exuded the cultivation of the origin returning pinnacle stage. His powerful aura caused the surrounding people to fall silent. Even Long Chun and Kong Jun couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Kong Jun's eyes turned, and he stared at Long Chun and sneered. "According to the rules of the 100 Smelting Sect, today I will challenge you in tool refinement. As long as you can surpass me in pill refinement or talisman incantation, the loser will not only have his cultivation crippled, he will also have to kneel and crawl through the 5 sects." Chapter 207. Privilege. Kong Jun's words stopped in everyone's ears. Everyone thought that Long Chen wouldn't agree. After all, Kong Jun was the leader of the 100 Smelting Clan's talisman refining faction's core disciples, while Long Chen was just a newcomer who had just entered the 100 Smelting Clan. However, no one expected that Long Chen would agree without hesitation. Good. Seeing Long Chen agree, Kong Jun laughed heartily. He secretly thought that Long Chen did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He said in a deep voice, "Then we will challenge you in a few days. At that time, you can climb to the Tongbai Gate and fight with Zhang Yishan." Ha! Long Chen helped Jian Shursen up. Seeing that Jian Shursen's injuries were not light, he was too lazy to say anything more to Kong Jun. He turned around and walked down the mountain. For the challenge in 10 days, only Zhang Yishan still needed to be prepared, otherwise it would be troublesome. However, he did not put Kong Jun in his eyes at all. Whether it was the path of alchemy or the path of arrays, he did not belong to Kong Jun's refining skills. Looking at Long Chen's departing figure, Su Fu sighed deeply. Since things had come to this point, he could no longer interfere. He could only glare fiercely at Kong Jun and leave. After Long Chen left, everyone was discussing. 10 days later, he would challenge Kong Jun of the 100 Smelting Clan and Zhang Yishan of the Tongbai Gate. The news spread like wildfire. On the other side, Long Chun and Jian Shursen had just returned to their cave when Elder Su Fu followed closely behind. "Long Chun, you cannot participate in the challenge in 10 days. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions," Elder Su Fu said in a deep voice. Unfortunately, Long Chun had no intention of replying. He just took out a few pills and threw them into Jian Shursen's mouth. Elder Su said in a deep voice, "The Sovereign has high expectations for your alchemy and array talent. Why do you have to take the risk in this kind of place?" "So Elder Su wants me to tuck my tail between my legs?" Long Chun said calmly. After listening to Long Chen's words, Elder Su seemed to have understood Long Chen's temperament and was too lazy to say anything more. Instead, he coldly snorted and threw down a jade slip. "Take care of yourself. Zhang Yishan is not comparable to the origin-returning realm cultivators of my 100 Smelting Sect." Long Chun watched Elder Su leave. Then, he opened the jade slip and a smile appeared on his face. Shockingly, the 100 Smelting Clan's elders had taken special care of him. Elder Su had a whole new level of respect for the jade slip that Long Chun had refined on the Immortal Ascension Road. He had even reported it to the 100 Smelting Clan's lord. After learning of Long Chen's talent in alchemy and array formations, he naturally wanted to promote him. Inside the jade slip was exactly what Long Chun wanted the most. That was the resources of the 100 Smelting Clan. The jade slip informed Long Chun that he could freely use the items in the Elixir Pavilion to refine pills, and that he could join any elder of the Talisman sect to learn array formations. In fact, there was more than one such privilege, but it was enough to show how much importance the 100 Smelting clan placed on Long Chun. 13. You and Marquis Fengqing cultivate here for a while, and take good care of Feng Shan. Maybe I can cure his dantian. I have to prepare for the next 10 days. Otherwise, Zhang Yishan will be troublesome. Long Chun gave a few instructions, then turned and left the cave. Marquis Fengqing and the other two were stunned. His dantian had been destroyed to this extent. Was there a way to cure it? Feng Shan, who was extremely weak, smiled bitterly, thinking that Long Chun was just comforting him. Only Jian Shisan firmly believed in Long Chun. After Long Chun left, Jian Shisan directly sat up, crossed his legs, closed his eyes, and began to cultivate. Marquis Fengqing looked at him and couldn't help but smile bitterly. The 5 major sects are far more powerful than the 9 great empires. With our cultivation, we can even fight against return of void stage cultivators. But recently, a core disciple of the Tongbi sect defeated me in one move. Jian Shisan said as he cultivated. Marquis Fengqing raised his eyebrows, and he was also very shocked. One had to know that although Jian Shisan's cultivation was only at the 7th level of the soul formation realm, his understanding of the sword Dao and the emperor-level sword technique Long Chun taught him should be no problem for him to fight against an early void stage cultivator. Being defeated in one move was enough to show how powerful Zhang Yishan was. Marquis Fengqing narrowed his eyes and asked, "The person Long Chun wants to challenge is Kong Jun. Not only Kong Jun, but also Zhang Yishan, the disciple of the Tongbi sect who defeated me in one move." Jian Shisan said in a deep voice. On the other hand, after walking out of the cave, Long Chun immediately went to the Elixir Pavilion. The Elixir Pavilion had a large number of elixirs of various grades. Long Chun found a method to repair the damage to his dantian according to the pill Dao inheritance in his mind, but it required a lot of elixirs. Therefore, he felt that Elder Su's Jade Slip was really timely. Not only that, but he could also use these elixirs to refine some pills that could improve his cultivation. After all, his dantian had a 100,000 miles wide sea of qi. If he didn't have enough resources to support it, he didn't know when he would be able to reach the return to void stage. Inside the Elixir Pavilion, people came and went. Many disciples went to exchange their tokens. Similar to the Black Dragon Empire's Imperial Academy, if one wanted to obtain resources in the 100 Refinement sect, they would have to exchange a lot of points. In fact, it was the same for other sects as well. The sources of these points were made up of many missions. For example, there was a large elixir field behind the 5 great sects. There were specialized people who took care of it, and it was said that it was a lucrative job. Originally, Long Chun wanted to accept some missions to earn points. However, now that he could obtain elixirs at will, it was naturally less troublesome. After entering the Elixir Pavilion, Long Chun picked nearly 100 elixirs in a row. When he walked out of the Elixir Pavilion, he only handed his token to the elder at the door. After the elder took the token, he stared at Long Chun and said, "You're Long Chun? Remember, although you can obtain elixirs at will, 70% of the pills you refine must be handed over to the sect. If you're found to have the intention of embezzling or selling elixirs, then you violated the great taboo of the 100 Refinement sect." Long Chun nodded. These rules were reasonable. Being able to save 70% was enough. After all, he could obtain elixirs at will from the Elixir Pavilion. Although I can obtain elixirs at will in the Elixir Pavilion, there are 10 treasures in the pavilion. 3 of them can be used to refine an Emperor-level elixir. It's a pity that I don't have the authority to use these 10 elixirs. Moreover, each elixir costs 100,000 points. It seems that I'll have to accept some missions. If I can refine this elixir, it will at least allow me to reach the 4th layer of the Divine Transformation Realm and step into the middle stage of the Divine Transformation Realm. Long Chun put the 100 elixirs into his storage ring. However, his mouth was muttering to himself, and there was a faint light in his eyes. Chapter 208. What do you mean by that? Long Chun slowed down and finally stopped. Why don't you all come out and meet us? Long Chun said in a deep voice. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 or 4 people appeared behind him. They stared at Long Chun and looked at each other. You seem to have special privileges in the spiritual medicine pavilion. We would like to make a deal with you. Make a deal? The corners of Long Chun's mouth curled up into a smile. He didn't want to waste any more time here, so he directly said, I'm not interested in doing business, so I'll take my leave. As he spoke, Long Chun's feet moved again. The faces of the people behind him suddenly sank. They jumped in front of Long Chun and blocked his path. Long Chun's eyes suddenly turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, You want to compete? Sir, why must you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Our deal will not allow you to violate the rules. Since you can obtain spiritual herbs as you wish, bring some more for us to refine. We'll return them to you once we're done, the leader of the group said in a low voice. Long Chun shook his head as realization dawned upon him. These people were probably all disciples of the alchemy faction. Perhaps they had just seen Long Chun obtain a large number of spirit herbs and knew that he had special privileges. What he meant was that he wanted to use Long Chun's privilege to obtain more spiritual herbs and then refine them to familiarize himself with the alchemy method. However, he didn't need to successfully refine the pills. On the surface, there didn't seem to be anything wrong, and it wouldn't violate any rules. For Long Chun, it was a piece of cake. However, Long Chun still shook his head. These people spoke lightly, but if they failed to refine the pills, used a large amount of spiritual herbs, or became greedy and took all the pills, then Long Chun would face the danger of being punished by the sect. Everyone, please step aside. I don't want to make this deal, Long Chun said coldly. The few of them stared at Long Chun. Their faces were gloomy and they were about to attack. However, the moment they took out their weapons, their leader was already sent flying. Scram! As this person was sent flying, Long Chun shouted as he stared at the others. Their complexions changed greatly. They never thought that Long Chun's speed would be so fast that they didn't even have the chance to react. Let him go. We were too reckless in this matter. The person who was sent flying hurriedly said to the remaining people. Long Chun snorted coldly and turned around to leave. They looked at Long Chun's back and exchanged glances. This person is only at the soul formation stage. Why does he have the combat prowess of a void return cultivator? It doesn't matter. This person is a little troublesome. However, I have received news that the Pill Tower will send 2 women over after some time. According to common sense, they should also have special privileges. At that time, we just have to use more methods. The leader wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He seemed to be very afraid of Long Chun's strength. After Long Chun returned to the Immortal's Cave, he immediately took out the vermilion bird fire cloud cauldron and began to refine the first pill. The first pill he needed to refine was the spiritual array C transformation pill. The refining of this pill was not complicated, but it required a lot of spiritual herbs. Fortunately, Long Chun found these spiritual herbs in the spiritual medicine pavilion. This pill could repair the damaged Chi C. Rather than repair, it was better to use the array in the pill to repair the damaged Dantian. There was a medium-sized alchemy room in each Immortal's Cave in the 100 Refinement Peak. The room was also connected to the alchemy fire. Long Chun quickly began to refine the pill. With the vermilion bird fire cloud cauldron and the inheritance of alchemy, it was not difficult for him to refine a king stage pill with the current strength of his divine thought. In just one day, he successfully refined this pill and handed it to Feng Shan. Immediately afterward, he began to retreat again. 10 days later, he would challenge Kong Jun and Zhang Yishan. For this, he had to make some preparations. On the other hand, the news that the new disciple of the 100 Refinement sect wanted to challenge the core disciple of the Tongbi sect, Zhang Yishan, had already spread in the Tongbi sect. Among the 5 major sects, the 100 Refinement sect was more like an auxiliary sect, complementing the other 4 major sects. Therefore, when this news spread, the entire 5 major sects were shocked. At least before Long Chun, They had never heard of a disciple of the Hundred Refinement sect taking the initiative to challenge the Tongbi sect, a sect that was famous for its combat strength. Of course, even if there were challengers, no one had ever won. Every one of them had lost miserably. Inside the Tongbi sect, Zhang Yishan, who originally did not care about Long Chen's challenge, became serious at this moment. This was not because he was not confident in defeating Long Chen, but because a direct disciple of the Tongbi sect had found him. Not only that, even the Wanjian sect and the Godly Sword sect had a few direct disciples that could be called monstrous at the same time to find him. And their goal was actually Long Chen's head. This put Zhang Yishan in a very difficult position. None of these people were existences that he could afford to offend, yet they had all come looking for him. He never thought that the head of a new disciple of the Hundred Refinement sect would be wanted by so many people. However, he quickly found out the whole story through various channels. I didn't think that Long Chen would actually anger Qin Yinzi, who was in seclusion, and he even used a Thunder Spirit Dao fruit as a prize to take Long Chen's life. Zhang Yishan muttered to himself in a deep voice. When he mentioned the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit, his eyes could not help but flash with a touch of greed. In his heart, defeating Long Chen was just a matter of reaching out his hand, but the next thing would not be easy to deal with. The slightest carelessness would cause him to lose his life. These people were all people that he could afford to provoke. After hesitating for a long time, Zhang Yishan's expression suddenly became serious, and he said to himself in a cold voice, "Rather than this, I might as well go all out and kill Long Chen, and I will personally go and get the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit." Time flew by, and 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. The battle between Long Chen and Zhang Yishan, as well as Kong Jun's duel, had already spread like wildfire. Outside Long Chen's cave, Jian Shisan, Marquis Feng Qing, and Feng Shan all stood at the entrance. "He really knows alchemy?" Feng Shan asked in disbelief. Jian Shisan and Marquis Feng Qing looked at each other and nodded with a wry smile. Thinking about the rumor in the 9 great empires that Long Chen was a king-stage alchemist, it seemed that the rumor was not false. After a long while, Long Chen walked out of the cave. "Are you sure you could defeat Zhang Yishan?" Marquis Feng Qing finally could not help but ask. In the past few days, the news of Zhang Yishan and Long Chen's duel had spread like wildfire. Almost everyone in the 100 Smelting clan knew about it, and Zhang Yishan's cultivation was also known by everyone. Defeating Jian Shisan with a single blow was enough to show that his combat strength was extraordinary, and no matter how abnormal Long Chen was, he was only in the soul formation stage. Long Chen smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "If it was 10 days ago, it might have taken some effort to defeat him, but now, I don't even need to do anything to kill him." The three of them paused as they listened to Long Chen's words, their faces full of confusion. What did he mean? Chapter 209. Gamble with one's life outside the Tongbi Gate on the square. What was rare was that there were no challengers from other sections. There was only Zhang Yishan and Kong Jun standing on the center stage. Apart from the 100 Smelting clan, the other clans basically had many disciples challenging each other every day. But today, the situation was exactly the opposite. The person Zhang Yishan was waiting for was shockingly a 100 Smelting sect disciple. Moreover, he was a newly promoted disciple of the 100 Smelting clan. If that was all there was to it, it would be fine. But who would have thought that this strange battle would attract the attention of so many people? The Godly Knife sect's direct disciple Zhu Wuqing, the Tongbi sect's direct disciple Ho Fiyuan, and the Wanjian sect's direct disciple Lian Cheng were all present. These people could be regarded as monstrous existences among the personal disciples of their respective sections. Among them, Lian Cheng of the Wanjian sect had already reached the late stage of the Void Return Realm. His strength was comparable to that of the 5 great sects. What's going on? Why did today's challenge attract so many people of extremely high status? Isn't that purple-haired guy Zhu Wuqing? His cultivation base has already reached the intermediate void return stage, right? Is there a need for him to watch this battle? Ho Fuyun was already at the Return to Void final stage last year, but he still came. Even the Wanjian sect's Lin Cheng showed up in person. It's said that this matter is related to Qing Yunzi. He seems to have obtained a Thunder Spirit Dao fruit from the Primeval Li clan. And if he wants to obtain this fruit, he seems to need the head of a person. Countless voices of discussion rose and fell, and the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit made everyone's eyes flash with greed. The Thunder Spirit Dao fruit was a spiritual item born from heaven and earth and could not be refined into a pill. However, it was extremely tempting to soul formation stage and even return to void stage cultivators. That was the ability to infuse all of his spiritual energy with the lightning attribute, and this transformation would last for the rest of his life. No one would have thought that Qing Yunzi would use this item as a stake to take the lives of the people of the Black Dragon Empire, but he really did it, using such a priceless spiritual item to take the life of a divine transformation realm expert. Perhaps he just wanted to use this to tell some people in the 9 great empires, and even the 5 great sects, that although his cultivation base wasn't high, and he might not be comparable to the Dao integration stage elders of many sects, his influence wasn't something that ordinary people could compare to. Look, Yi Hailon is here too. The Holy Maiden of the 5 sects, Yi Hailon. The crowd, who had been discussing fervently because of the arrival of so many powerhouses, instantly turned their gazes to the right and saw Yi Hailon leisurely walking over. She was dressed in a light veil, but in the face of countless burning gazes, she appeared abnormally calm. Her perfect body curves, coupled with an indescribably beautiful face, seemed to make everything pale in comparison. With the arrival of Yi Hailon, the entire scene fell silent. Even the direct disciples could not help but lock their gazes on her. What was her purpose in coming here? The Thunder Spirit Dao fruit. The direct disciples couldn't help but think, but they immediately shook their heads. As the Holy Maiden of the 5 great sects, it wouldn't be too difficult for her to obtain a Thunder Spirit Dao fruit. As for why she came today, no one knew. Perhaps she was just passing by and came to watch this battle without any suspense. After Yi Hailon sat down, Long Chun, Jian Shisan, and the others gradually arrived. Jian Shisan, Marquis Feng Qing, and Feng Shan walked behind Long Chun. When they saw such a big scene, their palms couldn't help but sweat. They had originally thought that it was just a competition, but who would have thought that it would attract so many powerhouses from the 5 great sects, and even the Holy Maiden of the 5 great sects, Yi Hailon. Is that him? Such a young man. He's the new disciple of the 100 Smelting Clan. Not only did he make a bet with Kong Jun, but he also wants to fight Zhang Yishan to the death. Is this person crazy? How can he defeat Zhang Yishan, who is about to become a direct disciple at his age? A Thunder Spirit Dao fruit for this brat's life? What a waste. Waste. Haha. As long as this kid dies, not to mention the 9 great empires, even the 5 great sects will rarely dare to touch Qing Yunzi's wings. Under everyone's gaze, Long Chun slowly walked onto the battle stage. At this moment, Kong Jun and Zhang Yishan were already waiting for him on the stage. Zhang Yishan looked at Long Chun and said playfully, "You still want to compete with Kong Jun? He can refine king-grade weapons. You just entered the 100 Smelting Clan, whether it's alchemy, talisman, or tool refining. Which one can you beat him in? Why don't the 2 of you stop competing? You and I could just fight. After all, for the dead, winning or losing really doesn't matter." Zhang Yishan's ridicule was self-evident, but the people around didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Someone even shouted, "What alchemy, talisman, or tool refining? Just fight. I want to see how many moves this guy can last. What's there to compete in your 100 Smelting Clan? Just let him fight with senior brother Zhang Yishan. After he dies, there's no need to compete. Ha. A 100 Smelting Clan disciple actually dares to challenge a core disciple of my Tongbi sect. He simply doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He's really courting death." Amidst the cries of the crowd, Zhang Yishan only felt that he was somewhat lucky today. He didn't expect that the trip to the 100 Smelting Peak would actually give him the opportunity to kill Long Chun and seize the Thunder Spirit Dao Fruit. Although there were many direct disciples present, Zhang Yishan knew that even if he killed Long Chen today, he wouldn't be able to take away Long Chen's head and obtain the Thunder Spirit Dao Fruit. He even began to plan to use this opportunity to make friends with someone, and the Wanjian sect's Liansheng was the first choice. Everyone, stop arguing. Although he will undoubtedly die today, I still have to carry out my bet with him. If he dies, how can I watch him kneel and crawl through the 5 great sects? Kong Jun shouted loudly. The corners of Long Chen's mouth revealed a cold smile when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. This instead allowed Kong Jun to become even more unscrupulous, and he continued, "As long as you can defeat me in alchemy or talismans, I'll kneel and crawl through the 5 great sects. But if you lose, you don't need to crawl through the 5 great sects today. After all, you're about to die. At that time, you only need to kneel and kowtow to me 10 times and bark a few times like a dog. After all, Zhang Yishan is still waiting to take your dog life. Ha ha, ha ha, ha." Mocking laughter rose and fell in succession. Ao Sanqiong appeared in the crowd, not far away at some point, and he stared at Long Chun with a smile. Long Chun stared at Kong Jun and said, "Since you're so confident in winning against me, why don't we bet something? For example, your life." "Bet my life." Kong Jun's pupils suddenly constricted, but he immediately raised his head and laughed loudly. Chapter 210. Young Master on the battle stage in front of the Tongbi Gate. Long Chun and Kong Jun were both disciples of the 100 Smelting Clan, but they were betting with their lives. However, Zhang Yishan's face turned ugly. He never thought that Kong Jun would want to beat him to it. In his opinion, not only was Long Chen's head valuable, but the sword in his hand was also absolutely priceless. However, if he were to fight with Kong Jun, he would definitely lose. At that time, all these things would belong to Kong Jun. However, at this point, he could only watch from the side. On the contrary, Kong Jun's face was very proud. One by one, the refining tools were gradually moved onto the stage. Kong Jun is the leader of the refining branch among the core disciples of the 100 Smelting Clan. Except for the few direct disciples who don't leave the clan, he can be considered the number one. It is said that Kong Jun can already refine a 3rd grade king level weapon. How can this young man win? He will definitely lose. Yes, it is said that this young man has just entered the 100 Smelting Clan. Although it is said that he is in the top 3 of the heaven list of the 9 great empires. How can he compare to Kong Jun in refining tools, refining pills, and making talismans? Everyone hissed and felt that this competition was really not worth watching. Kong Jun had entered the 100 Smelting Clan for a few years, and his talent in refining tools was outstanding. He was not even 30 years old, but he could already refine a 3rd grade king level weapon. This was enough to see his strength. Long Chun was not even 20 years old and had just entered the 100 Smelting Clan. How could he compete? According to the competition rules of the 100 Smelting Clan, whether it is refining pills, making talismans, or refining tools, as long as you can reach the same level as me, you will be considered the winner. Kong Jun looked at Long Chun with contempt and ridiculed. Long Chen's mouth flashed a slight smile. His hand moved and took out the Suzaku Fire Cloud Cauldron. However, at this moment, the surface of the cauldron was covered by a concealment technique. No one could see any abnormalities. In the eyes of others, it was no different from an ordinary cauldron. Of course, everyone could see that Long Chun was using a concealment technique. However, this was a technique commonly used by alchemists, so no one cared. Refining pills? Kong Jun suddenly became more disdainful. It was common knowledge that within the 3 branches of the 100 Smelting Clan, pill refinement was the most difficult and tedious, followed by talisman incantation, and finally, weapon refinement. Of course, in terms of cultivation difficulty, talismans were actually the most difficult. But in general, it was alchemy because there were too many things to pay attention to. Therefore, even in the 5 great sects, many alchemy grandmasters were already in their 50s or 60s. This brat actually wants to compare alchemy with Kong Jun's artifact forging. If Kong Jun can refine a third-grade king ranked weapon, wouldn't he be refining a third-grade king ranked pill? King stage alchemist? A kid who hasn't even reached 20 years old? I think Zhang Yishan is going to die from anger. This Long Chun is probably going to die at the hands of Kong Jun. The surrounding people shook their heads incessantly, as if they had no desire to watch it all. In fact, they had only come today to see who had killed Long Chun, and who would be able to obtain his head and obtain the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit. On the stage, the direct disciples of the various sects all looked impatient. Their goal was the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit, and they didn't care at all who killed Long Chun. Only the 5 great sect saintess, Yi Hailon, stared at Long Chun and Kong Jun on the stage, and the corners of her mouth revealed an enchanting smile. "Miss, what are you smiling about?" A pretty maid on the side asked casually. Yi Hailon's beautiful eyes twitched, and she said indifferently, "Do you remember that I once had a playmate in the Pill Tower when I was young? I originally thought that it would take a few years for him to become a king-ranked alchemist before coming to the 5 great sects, but I didn't expect that he would arrive in a few days." "Oh, miss, are you talking about the daughter of the Black Dragon Empire's Alchemist Guild's president, who was obsessed with alchemy?" At that time, she was about the same age as Miss and was also obsessed with alchemy. But no matter how outstanding her talent was, it was impossible for her to reach the king rank so quickly, right? The other maid recalled for a moment, and then cried out in realization. Yi Hailon's frosty face revealed a rare smile again, and her red lips moved slightly. "I've been in contact with her for so many years. A few days ago, she told me that she had become a king-ranked alchemist, and that she had a master who was 1 or 2 years older than her." When Yi Hailon said this, the 2 maids' eyes widened like walnuts, and then they shook their heads fiercely and said, "Miss, that Lu Yi only knows how to refine pills. Could she have been deceived by someone? A master 2 years older than her? With her talent, I'm afraid that even her father wouldn't dare to be her master. 2 years older than her. This is definitely a liar." Yi Hailon shook her head lightly, and there seemed to be some doubt in her eyes. Then she stared at Long Chun, who had already started refining pills, and said, "This is the purpose of my visit today. Miss, are you saying that this arrogant young man for the 100 Smelting Clan is the master that Lu Yi, the alchemy addict, mentioned?" "Haha, I said that she was deceived. After not seeing her for so many years, she is still so naive, only knowing how to refine pills." The 2 maids shook their heads and laughed. On the platform, a sonorous sound rang out. Kong Jun was full of confidence, and his face was full of ridicule. The giant hammer fell continuously, and a rough, sword embryo gradually formed. On the other side, Long Chun had already noticed that Yi Hailon was also watching, but in fact, even he didn't know that Yi Hailon and Lu Yi had such a relationship. After all, he had no relationship with Lu Yi in his previous life. When he left the 5 great sect for the ancient desolate land, Lu Yi hadn't even joined the 5 great sects yet. But in this life, many changes had happened because of him, such as Lu Yi becoming his disciple and learning alchemy. Long Chun withdrew his thoughts and wholeheartedly immersed himself in the pill cauldron. The pill he was refining now was a king level 5 pill. Although Long Chun didn't put much effort into refining pills, with the inheritance of alchemy and his dominant level divine consciousness, everything seemed to be at his fingertips. If not for this, with Li Tian's trash talent in his previous life, how could he have reached the level of strength second only to the dominant level? Bang, bang, bang. As Long Chun threw one pill after another into the pill cauldron, Kong Jun was still standing on the other side. His face was full of excitement, as if he was very satisfied with the sword in his hand that had just been refined. Then he stared at Long Chun and sneered loudly. "You still haven't succeeded? My weapon has already been refined. Now all I have to do is add an array on it." As he spoke, Kong Jun said to a disciple of the 100 Smelting Clan below the stage, Help me add the corresponding array pattern in the groove left on it. After the disciple of the array formation clan received the sword, his face suddenly lit up, and he cried out, "Congratulations, Senior Kong Jun. This sword has reached King Level 4. The people around were in an uproar. Kong Jun had broken through at this time and refined a King Level 4 weapon. Chapter 211. Pill Formation. Kong Jun's breakthrough caused everyone to lose all hope in Long Chun. Kong Jun's face was flushed red as he laughed heartily. He didn't expect that this meaningless fight with Long Chun would actually allow him to make a breakthrough in his refining cultivation, which had been stuck for a long time. As a result, Long Chun had no chance at all. However, Long Chin's hands continued to dance in the air as the elixirs fell into the cauldron one after another. After Kong Jun finished refining, everyone turned their attention to Long Chun out of boredom. However, they found out that the fire storage array under Long Chun had been extinguished at some point. The fire storage array was an array that temporarily placed the fire used to refine elixirs into another medium. Usually, it was placed in a large jade jar and could be used anywhere to refine elixirs. However, how could one refine elixirs without a fire? Everyone was stunned. What was Long Chun doing? How could he refine elixirs when the fire was extinguished? The crowd burst into an uproar when they saw this. What is he doing? Where's the fire? Is he playing with us? That's impossible. Look at his technique and the frequency of putting in the elixirs. It seems natural. It doesn't seem fake. What natural? How old is he? He just entered the 100 Smelting Clan. How could he refine elixirs? I think he knows he's going to die today. He's just stalling for time. Everyone's shouts spread throughout the crowd. Even Yi Hailon, who was watching from above, could not help but frown. She seemed to be very puzzled. Seeing the commotion around him, Kong Jun raised his head and walked towards the Long Chun pill cauldron. He sneered and said, "Putting on an act, I'll kick your pill cauldron and see what kind of pills are inside." In his opinion, even if Long Chun knew a little about refining elixirs, it was impossible for him to refine a king-grade elixir. Even a spirit-grade first or second-grade elixir would be amazing. Kick him over. He's wasting everyone's time. He's just pretending. What's wrong with living a little longer? Hurry up and die. Didn't you just boast shamelessly? Betting your life? I think you're looking for death. Ha! Senior Kong Jun, kick him over. Kick his cauldron over. Kong Jun sneered. Spiritual light surged on his right foot, and he was about to kick the pill cauldron. However, at this moment, the 100 Smelting Clan's alchemy division, who had been silent all this time, shouted in unison, "Stop! Show mercy!" No. Loud shouts could be heard as a young man in his 30s rushed onto the fighting ring and blocked Kong Jun's attack with lightning speed. This scene truly caused the surrounding people to be baffled. Could it be that Long Chun is related to the alchemy lineage? Kong Jun's face immediately darkened. He asked the person in front of him in a deep voice, "Li Fong, what do you mean by this?" Li Fong was the leader of the core disciples of the 100 Smelting Sect's alchemy branch. He was also one of the 3 people that Fong Shan had mentioned back then. His alchemy cultivation had also reached the Grandmaster realm. He could refine king-level medicinal pills and was also known as a king-level alchemist. Li Fong turned around and looked deeply at Long Chun. He said in a deep voice, "This person is still refining pills. How can you kick his cauldron? Moreover, this person's technique and the fluctuation of spiritual power emitted from the cauldron are impressive." Hearing this, Kong Jun suddenly frowned. He knew nothing about alchemy, so he couldn't understand Li Fong's words at all. He just said in a cold voice, "You mean he is still refining pills?" Li Fong nodded heavily. On the other side, the alchemy division also stared at Long Chun, as if they wanted to remember him in their minds. Perhaps this was the so-called layman watching the fun, while the expert watching the skill. Kong Jun snorted disdainfully and said, "Do you really think he can refine king-level medicinal pills?" Before Li Fong had time to speak, he heard Long Chun suddenly exhale a turbid breath. The pill cauldron in front of him suddenly shook, and the fighting ring below cracked inch by inch. "This pill is almost done. If it can be nurtured for 3 more days, it can reach perfection. Long Chun stared at the pill cauldron and said indifferently. Kong Jun sneered when he heard this and said, "Nurture for 3 days? Why don't you say 3 years? Li Fong, quickly get out of the way. I'll let you see what kind of broken pill this guy can refine." You were actually deceived by his pretentious tricks. Li Fong's face was ashen, but he also knew that it was impossible to achieve Long Chen's 3 days. Long Chun looked at Kong Jun playfully and said to Li Fong indifferently, "If he wants to open it, then let him open it. Since he is courting death, who can stop him?" For a moment, everyone's eyes fell on the pill cauldron in front of Long Chun. They saw Kong Jun slowly walk over, turning a deaf ear to Long Chen's words. His right hand flickered, and suddenly a gust of wind lifted the pill cauldron. A scorching heat wave rushed out from inside, causing Kong Jun and Li Fong to both take a few steps back. Even the spectators at this moment felt that the air above the pill cauldron was distorted by the scorching heat. In fact, it was not that Long Chun did not use fire, but that he closed the fire storing array on the outside and used the vermilion bird's fire inside the pill cauldron. Using fire inside the pill cauldron had a great demand on the control of divine sense. After all, if one was slightly careless, this flame was enough to burn everything to ashes. Of course, all of this was not without reward. Long Chun waved his right hand, and the 3 pills inside the pill cauldron fell into his hand. There were 7 vein patterns on them. Any grade of pill could produce vein patterns, and the number of vein patterns was the limit. The moment this pill appeared, everyone was stunned. Li Fong, Kong Jun, and Zhang Yishan, who was not far away, could not help but gasp. Everyone in the 100 Smelting Clan's alchemy division stood up abruptly. Their eyes were like knives as they stared at Long Chen's right hand. They only felt a continuous roar in their minds, as if thunder was flashing. Although the pill was held in Long Chen's hand, there were several golden rays outside it. There were a total of 6 golden rays. King-grade golden rays. 6 golden rays proved that this was a king-grade, 6th-grade pill. How is this possible? He actually refined a king-grade pill, and it's even a king-grade 6th-grade pill. A disciple of the Wanjian sect could not help but exclaim, "A king-grade 6th-grade pill? Oh my god, how old is this guy?" The youngest king-grade alchemist in the history of the 100 Smelting Clan was 22 years old. This guy looks like he's not even 17 or 18 years old. At the same time, Kong Jun's face was even paler. He stared at Long Chun. He only felt that his heart was ruthlessly grasped by someone, and it was extremely uncomfortable. It was as if the exclamations around him were mocking him. Chapter 2:12. King Stage. On the dueling stage, a strange battle was taking place. This strange battle had not only attracted the most talented disciples from the various sects, but also the holy maiden of the 5 sects, Yi Hailon. Now, because of Kong Jun's words, the 100 Smelting Sect's alchemy faction's disciples had specially returned to the 100 Smelting Sect and invited a pill-testing grandmaster. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, everyone's gaze fell on the hunchbacked old man. He gradually walked in front of Long Chun and said lightly, "Give me one of the pills you refined. Under normal circumstances, I don't need to eat it to judge the pill's grade or effect." Li Fong stood to the side and said to Long Chun, "Elder Gu is the most famous pill-testing grandmaster in our alchemy faction. He is also a king-stage alchemist. Junior Long Chun, please rest assured." Li Fong explained to Long Chun. Obviously, he was also very curious about the pill in his hand. Long Chun was really too young. Could such a young man really become a king-stage alchemist? Long Chun glanced at the white-haired, hunchbacked Elder Gu and nodded slightly. He threw out one of the pills in his hand and handed it to him. As the scarlet gold pill with cracks fell into Elder Gu's hand, the great elder held the pill in his hand and observed it for a long time. He frowned slightly and sniffed it. Seeing this scene, Long Chun's lips curled into a smile. His cracked pill was very different from ordinary pills. It was basically impossible to judge based on these external factors. It could even be considered a waste pill. This was somewhat similar to the scene when he first entered the pill pagoda. Long Chun said lightly, "Elder, you should take it. Otherwise, this pill can't be judged based on these external factors." The elder nodded, but his brows gradually furrowed. In his opinion, although this pill had a scarlet gold glow, it had no spiritual power and there were cracks on it. It was most likely a waste pill. But since Long Chun said so, he did not hesitate and directly swallowed the pill. The pill entered his mouth. A scarlet gold light flowed down from his Adam's apple, and then like a stream, it spread from the center to his limbs and bones. Powerful spiritual energy spread out with a bang, and a burst of popping sounds came from Elder Gu's body. Boom! Suddenly, Elder Gu's body emitted a wave of spiritual energy, causing Li Fong and Kong Jun to retreat dozens of meters in shock. Long Chun also put away the pill cauldron with one hand. After all, if the concealing array of the vermilion bird fire cloud cauldron was broken, it would most likely cause a commotion. Even if people didn't recognize this cauldron, its shape was too strange. Pucci, the intense spiritual energy fluctuation dissipated, and Elder Goose spat out a mouthful of blood. I told you that this pill is fake. How could you refine a 6th grade king tier pill? Kong Jun laughed crazily. Li Fong hurriedly ran in front of Elder Gu and helped him up. At this moment, although Elder Gu was weak, his hair was disheveled, and he was in a sorry state, and there were traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were surprisingly bright as he stared at Long Chun. After a while, he shouted, "This pill is undoubtedly a 6th grade king tier pill, and its quality is far higher than ordinary pills. Even some 7th grade king tier pills are not inferior to them. Unfortunately, it's a pity that this pill came out of the cauldron too early. Otherwise, it would be very likely to become a 7th grade king tier pill after a few more days of nourishment." As soon as Elder Gu's words fell, everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked and speechless as they stared at Long Chun. Even Li Fong almost let go of Elder Gu's hand. This was actually a cauldron of 7th grade king rank medicinal pills. A young king stage alchemist could refine a king stage 7th grade king stage alchemist. My God, it's true. This guy is really a king tier alchemist and a 7th grade king tier alchemist. How old is this guy? He actually has such a talent in alchemy. He will most likely become an emperor tier alchemist in the future. Looking at the entire 100 Smelting clan, there are thousands of king tier alchemists among the core disciples and pro-disciples around the age of 30. However, there are less than 500 king tier alchemists who can refine pills above the 3rd grade king tier. There are only a handful of king tier alchemists who are around the age of 30 and above the 6th grade king tier. How old is this guy? The 100 Smelting clan's alchemy division is going to rise. Elder Gu looked at Long Chun with eyes full of appreciation. Yi Hailon in the stands stared at Long Chun and nodded slightly. The two maids beside her were so shocked that they could not close their mouths. The young man in front of them was really a king tier alchemist, and he had reached the late stage of the king tier. Such talent was probably even better than Lu Yi of the Pill Tower. No wonder he could be her master. On the other hand, Kong Jun staggered back until he reached the corner of the fighting ring. He had lost. A 4th grade king tier spiritual sword against a 6th grade king tier elixir. The outcome was obvious. The people around them looked very strange. They originally thought that Kong Jun would definitely win due to his excellent performance. However, Long Chin's half-finished elixir had reached the 6th grade king tier. On the other hand, Zhang Yishan's face suddenly turned red. Kong Jun had lost, which meant that Long Chun did not have to die. He could fight Long Chun to the death in this fighting ring. This was a great opportunity for him. With Long Chin's head, even if he could not get the Thunder Spirit Dao fruit, he could curry favor with the genius disciple of the Wanjian sect, Lin Cheng. From then on, he would find himself a very powerful backer. Impossible, impossible. How could I lose to you? Kong Jun shouted himself hoarse. He did not have the slightest intention of accepting his fate. He directly raised his weapon and rushed toward Long Chun with the strength of the Void Return Realm. How dare you? However, before he could take a few steps, he was shocked by Elder Gu's shout. Elder Gu said coldly, "Within the same sect, you can't fight to the death. Since you're competing with Long Chun, you have to keep your promise." However, he immediately looked at the trembling Kong Jun, shook his head, and said to Long Chun with a sigh, "After all, he's also a king-tier weapon refiner. You two are from the same sect. Dying like this is too," Long Chun said indifferently. "It's not impossible for you to live, but you can't keep your cultivation. Also, you were the one who said that you had to crawl through the 5 great sects on your knees that day. In fact, if it were not for Elder Gu, Long Chun would not have let Kong Jun live. To Long Chun, someone like Kong Jun deserved to die. If he lost now, he would not be so lucky." "Crawl, I'll crawl," Kong Jun hissed. He actually landed his palm on his own dantian. Soon after, the aura around his body dispersed with a loud bang, and the spirit chi within his dantian scattered in all directions like a tide. Now that so many people from the 5 great sects were watching, he knew that he was lucky to be alive today. Chapter 213. Formation. Kong Jun's defeat allowed everyone to see Long Chun's heaven-defying talent in alchemy. Long Chun stared at Kong Jun, who was kneeling on the ground. He glanced at him indifferently, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in his heart. On the other side, Elder Gu took a deep look at Kong Jun before shaking his head and walking towards Long Chun. He said in a deep voice, "Do you really want to fight with Zhang Yishan? He's already at the 3rd stage of the Return to Void stage, and his comprehension of battle skills and utilization of spirit power far surpasses the Return to Void stage cultivators of the 9 great empires." Before Long Chun could speak, Zhang Yishan had already taken the lead and walked up. He said playfully, "Elder Gu, you should quickly get off the stage. This isn't the 100 Smelting Clan. This is my Tongbi Clan's challenge stage. Since Long Chun has already agreed to the challenge, then we can only fight today. Life and death will be decided by fate." Zhang Yishan's face was full of ridicule. He already had the intention to kill Long Chun. Zhang Yishan has already reached the Void Return level and formed a golden core. When he was in the Divine Transformation stage, he even created a 2,000-foot sea of chi. He's definitely not someone the 9 great empires can compare to. It seems that Long Chun won't be able to escape today. What a pity. He's a genius of the Tao of alchemy. Why does he have to compare his battle prowess with the people of the Tongbi sect? Isn't this simply courting death? It's said that this person is in the top 3 of the heaven roll, so it's normal for him to have some pride. However, I'm afraid he's mistaken about one thing. The Void Return cultivators of the 5 great sects are not comparable to those of the 9 great empires. Everyone sighed endlessly, and all of them felt that Long Chun would undoubtedly die today, and they felt extremely regretful towards Long Chun's natural talent in pill refinement. Only Long Chun couldn't help but smile. "Do you really want to fight me?" Zhang Yishan's face darkened upon hearing this. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, "You can only blame your head for being too valuable. A battle between you and me is different from alchemy. Today, with your early divine transformation stage cultivation, you will die for sure." Wong. With that, Zhang Yishan waved his right hand, and a spear appeared in his hand. It was the king-tier spear that Kong Jun had forged that day. However, there were many formation inscriptions on it now, making it even more powerful. Elder Gu's face was ashen. However, under the countless gazes around him, there was nothing he could do. He slowly retreated from the battle platform with Li Fong and the others. The natural talent Long Chun revealed today practically represented that he would definitely step foot into the emperor rank in the future. If he were to die today, it would truly be too much of a pity. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Long Chun and Zhang Yishan stood facing each other. The spear in Zhang Yishan's hand was like a rainbow, swallowing and spitting out spiritual light. In front of him, Long Chun was standing straight with his hands behind his back. There was a faint smile on his face, and he didn't move at all. He looked confident and natural. Are you waiting for death? Zhang Yishan didn't dare to make a move when he saw Long Chun fighting in such a strange manner. He didn't even take out his strange sword. Long Chun said indifferently, I'm waiting for you to make a move. What's wrong with this guy? Why isn't he moving? He has completely given up. After all, it's impossible for him to win against a return to Void Stage Cultivator. What is Zhang Yishan waiting for? Just kill this guy. He's just bluffing. How can he defeat Zhang Yishan? The disciples of the Tongbi sect, the Wanjian sect, and the other sects all shouted loudly. A disciple of the 100 Smelting sect challenging another sect that was famous for its combat methods was simply an insult to them. Zhang Yishan's face gradually darkened amidst the cries of the crowd. Soon after, he violently shook his head. So what if Long Chen's talent in alchemy was great? Only death awaited him in the face of absolute combat strength. Go to hell, Zhang Yishan shouted coldly. Countless spiritual lights on his spear cut out countless gusts of wind that turned into attacks that fell on Long Chun. At the same time, the spear in his hand was aimed straight at Long Chen's heart. As soon as the spear was thrown, the battle platform below cracked and waves of air rippled in the air. Such a tyrannical attack shocked everyone. Below the stage, Jian San was about to rush up the stage when he saw this scene. But he was stopped by Feng Qingho, who said indifferently, Do you still remember what he said? He doesn't need to make a move to defeat Zhang Yishan. Look, he's still moving slightly, but his expression is calm and composed. He must have a way to win. Marquis Feng Qing observed carefully. In fact, he didn't want Jian San to rush up. After all, he couldn't defeat Zhang Yishan even if he went up. Seeing that the spear was already 10 meters away from Long Chun, Zhang Yishan's lips curled into a smile. At this moment, Long Chen's right hand appeared in front of him, and several brown pills with cracks on them fell to the ground. On the other hand, Long Chun retreated like a swallow. Puff, puff, puff. One by one, the brown pills exploded before they even hit the ground. The blinding light caused everyone to close their eyes. Even Zhang Yishan, who was like an arrow on a bowstring, couldn't help but freeze. However, his eyes were temporarily blinded by the blinding light. After stepping into the return to Void Stage, his divine sense had reached a certain level. Naturally, he discovered that Long Chun had escaped, and there didn't seem to be any danger around him. However, the moment the strong light dissipated, he was stunned. Even the people in the surroundings rubbed their eyes hard. All around him, a series of killing arrays appeared out of thin air. The source of these arrays was actually the few medicinal pills that he had just consumed. What's going on? How can these pills trigger an array? Zhang Yishan cried out. He didn't expect that he would fall in a Long Chen's trap as soon as he made a move. Moreover, it was such a strange array. Of course, other than being surprised, no one objected to this. After all, Long Chun was a disciple of the 100 Smelting clan, so he naturally relied on talismans and pills. If he had the strength, he could even find people from other sects to fight for him. However, this array was too strange. It actually appeared from within the pills. Wouldn't it be impossible to guard against it? Such a simple release was probably many times faster than using talismans. Everyone also realized that within the 100 Smelting clan, not only were the alchemy division staring at Long Chun, but even the talisman division stood up one by one and stared at Long Chun with a strange expression. However, the next scene shocked everyone as they stared at the center of the battle stage where Zhang Yishan was. The array that surrounded Long Chun actually shrank inwards as he grabbed at the air with his right hand. Then, a scorching flame exploded out of thin air, emitting a deafening roar. The flames disappeared in a flash, and the array also disappeared. The pills on the ground had also turned into powder. Zhang Yishan also disappeared. He completely disappeared in front of everyone as if he had never appeared. Only a pile of black ashes remained on the ground. Long Chun shook his head and looked at the elixir on the ground that was gradually turning into powder. He was a little interested. This was the elixir that he had refined a few days ago. It was called the Receiving Array Elixir. It was a combination of elixir and array. Chapter 214. That kind of excitement. Zhang Yishan's momentum was great, but his death was silent and unclear. After a short period of shock, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Killing a Void Return Realm cultivator in the blink of an eye, with just a few pills, this was simply too shocking. One had to know that Void Return Realm cultivators had already refined their soul and reached the level of releasing their divine sense. Under normal circumstances, it was very difficult to kill someone with talismans. However, Long Chen's move was beyond everyone's expectations. The killing array within the pill was released much faster than talismans, and at the same time, it bloomed with a strong light that no one could react to. Of course, there was also the flame within. Zhang Yishan did not even last a breath before he was turned into ashes. Zhang Yishan is dead. The core disciple of the Tongbi sect lost to a new disciple of the 100 Smelting sect. Following the exclamation of the 100 Smelting sect, the enthusiasm of all the disciples of the 100 Smelting sect was completely ignited, and they all cheered in unison. Who said that the 100 Smelting sect is the weakest of the 5 sects in terms of battle strength? Ha! Zhang Yishan was crushed by the array in the blink of an eye. This is enough to show that as long as the people of the 100 Smelting sect cultivate diligently, their battle strength may not be weaker than the other sects. In contrast to the situation of the 100 Smelting sect, the faces of the people of the other sects were somewhat gloomy. Especially the disciples of the Tongbi sect. They all felt their faces burning. A fellow who was about to become a direct disciple of the 100 Smelting sect, which was known for its battle strength, actually lost to a disciple of the 100 Smelting sect. Moreover, it was an instant kill. This was simply the greatest insult. At the same time, the monstrous direct disciple of the Wanjian sect, Lin Cheng, the direct disciple of the Tongbi sect, Ho Fei Yuan, and the direct disciple of the Godly Saber sect, Zhu Wuqing, all looked at Long Chun. Originally, they wanted to wait for Zhang Yishan to kill Long Chun, then think of a way to use their own abilities to seize Long Chen's head in exchange for the Thunder Spirit Dao Fruit. Now, Long Chun was not dead, but Zhang Yishan was dead. The three of them clearly understood that if they attacked Long Chun in front of everyone with their status, not to mention the 100 Smelting clan, even Long Chun would refuse. At that time, it would just be a joke. Long Chun stared at the few monstrous disciples and smiled coldly. How could he not know the purpose of these people? Every one of them wanted to take his life. Everyone, if you don't want to fight, then I'll take my leave. Long Chun turned around and walked into the crowd of the 100 Smelting clan. The faces of the 3 monstrous disciples were ashen. How could they not understand that Long Chen's words were directed at them? Seeing the disciples of the 100 Smelting clan leave, in high spirits with proud faces, the faces of the various sects were all green and red. After Long Chen left, Yi Hailon also slowly walked down from the spectator's stand under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. He followed Long Chun and the others as they walked towards the 100 Smelting clan. In the Wanjian sect, Ao Sangxiong also smiled and followed closely behind. It had to be said that Yi Hailon was called the Holy Maiden of the 5 sects. It was not without reason that she was a banished immortal, not to mention her stunning appearance. Just her indifferent and otherworldly coldness made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Ao Sangxiong's departure did not attract anyone's attention, and they were too lazy to care. But when Yi Hailon walked towards the 100 Smelting clan, everyone started to talk about it. Some people even guessed that she was going to find Long Chun. Of course. In fact, it was indeed so. Whether it was Ao Sangxiong or Yi Hailon, this trip was to find Long Chun. Long Chun and Jian Shusan walked out of the range of the Tongbi gate and slowed down. Not long after the three of them stopped, Ao Tsangxiong was the first to arrive. Without waiting for Ao Tsangxiong to speak, Long Chen smiled and said, "Your wine won't run away. You can go back to the 100 Smelting Clan with the two of them first." Oh, Tsangxiong was startled and then burst into laughter. He felt that it was easy to talk to Long Chen. Before the words came out, he already knew what Long Chen was thinking. On the other hand, Jian Shisan asked in a low voice, "Master, why don't you go with us? This way, we can take care of each other." Long Chen glared at Jian Shisan, his face darkening, and said, "After you return to the 100 Smelting Clan, if your swordsmanship can't reach the perfection of martial arts within 10 days, wait for me to give you a good special training." With that, Long Chen turned and walked out of the 5 sects. Seeing Long Chen walk away, Jian Shisan looked innocent, while Lord Fengqing and Ao Tsangxiong couldn't help but laugh. They pulled Jian Shisan and walked towards the 100 Smelting Clan. Lord Fengqing stared at Jian Shisan and shook his head. "Can you stop thinking about swordsmanship? Your master obviously wants to pick up girls. Why are you still causing trouble here?" Jian Shisan was stunned and said, "Pick up girls? Who? Master doesn't seem to know anyone in the 5 sects, right?" Ao Tsangxiong and Lord Fengqing were speechless. They had all sensed that Yi Hailon was following closely behind. This trip must be to find Long Chen. Only Jian Shisan actually thought it was a coincidence. Looking at the strange faces of the two, Jian Shisan finally came to a realization and cried out involuntarily, "You two are saying that Master wants to pick up the holy maiden of the 5 sects. Yi Hailon." At the back, the servant girl beside Yi Hailon scolded Long Chen. "Miss, why are you looking for this person? He knows that we are behind. If it were anyone else, they would have turned back to curry favor with us." This guy actually turned around and walked out of the 5 sects. That's right, that's right. Could it be that this person wants to use this method to attract Mrs. attention? What wishful thinking. He doesn't deserve Mrs. status. Hearing the two servant girls scolding, Yi Hailon frowned slightly. In fact, although Long Chen's talent was outstanding, it didn't attract her at all. However, since she knew that Long Chen was Lu Yi's master, then she had to teach him a thing or two today. Otherwise, he would lose his life in the hands of the monstrous disciples of the 5 sects. "No matter, I don't have anything to do today. I'll just go and take a look," Yi Hailon said faintly. Her expression didn't change, but it revealed a special kind of beauty, one in front and one behind. Long Chen didn't know why, but at this moment his heart was actually a little uneasy and even beat a little faster. No matter how he calmed his mind, he couldn't control it. He stopped in his tracks. In front of him was a medium-sized lake. This place wasn't far from the 5 sects, but this kind of lake without the slightest bit of spiritual power was not beautiful to the disciples of the 5 sects. Therefore, this place was deserted. "You didn't lead me here just to look at this ordinary lake, did you?" Behind Long Chen, the sound of nature faintly sounded, and a strange fragrance from the air reached the tip of his nose. At this moment, his heart was completely in a mess, bosom friends from the previous life, and now they meet again. All the things of the past flashed past Long Chen's eyes like smoke. Chapter 215. Mysterious stone wall. Long Chen stopped in front of the lake that could not be any more ordinary. Behind him, Yi Hailon's graceful figure walked over leisurely. The sound of branches cracking under her feet seemed to have become pleasing to the ears. Long Chen let out a long sigh of relief. He tried his best to calm himself down before replying, "Although this pool of water is extremely close to the 5 great sects, almost no one has ever come here. What's beneath this pool of water?" Long Chen's words caused Yi Hailon to be slightly puzzled. Soon after, he shook his head and said, "I don't care about what's in this place. I'm here on behalf of Sister Yi to tell you some things." "Little Sister Yi?" Long Chen was stunned. He stared at Yi Hailon in surprise and asked curiously, "You know Lu Yi? I didn't even know about this." Yi Hailon frowned and said in a low voice, and I haven't seen each other for many years, and we've only contacted each other through messages. She cares a lot about you, her master. Today, I advise you not to enter the Fire Seed secret realm that will be opened by the 5 sects in 3 months. Fire Seed secret realm? When he heard these words, his eyes suddenly lit up like never before. Other than the large amount of resources in the 5 sects, there was something else that he wanted. It was the fire attribute spiritual vein in the Fire Seed secret realm. The 5 great sects had existed for a very long time, and they controlled the boundless territories of the 9 great empires. Every year, they would distribute countless resources, and these countless resources came from the 5 spirit veins under the 5 great sects. Because of these 5 spirit veins, the spiritual energy in the areas of the 5 great sects was extremely dense. Countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures, as well as spiritual herbs, were inexhaustible. However, no one knew that there was a 6th spirit vein in the tender mystic realm that everyone in the 5 sects knew about. Furthermore, this spirit vein had an extremely rich fire attribute, and its purity far surpassed that of the other 5 spirit veins. In his previous life, Long Chun discovered this spiritual vein by chance. Using the body of the great emperor, his cultivation soared, and he slaughtered many enemies along the way. Inside the secret realm of Fire Seed, it was also at that time that he saved Yi Halen's life, and the two of them became entangled. There are many fire seeds in the Fire Seed secret realm that can refine the Sea of Qi. This is a great opportunity for me. If I want to break through to the divine transformation realm in a short time, I have to go there. Long Chun thought to himself. After a short moment of silence, Long Chun regained his senses. He did not choose to answer Yi Hailon directly, but instead changed the topic. There must be something you need in this lake. You must go down and take a look. Long Chun took a deep look at Yi Hailon. His eyes flashed with gentleness and guilt that he had never seen before. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left without stopping at all. Yi Hailon was not affected by Long Chun's departure. He did not even turn his head back. He only frowned and said, "This person is very strange. This pool of water is ordinary and has always been near the 5 major sections. What's so strange about it?" Yi Hailon stared at the calm surface of the lake and could not help but feel puzzled. Her hands danced in front of her eyes, and rays of light blue light appeared above her eyes. Then, she slowly walked around the pool of water. Her tall and slender figure was like a divine crane, and she was extremely beautiful. After a while, she stopped in her tracks and frowned deeply. This was because there was a huge stone wall in the middle of the pool of water, and this stone wall was actually able to escape her spirit eyes. Spirit eyes was not a difficult technique. Anyone who had reached the return to void stage could use it. Under normal circumstances, it was used to search for spiritual objects to assist in martial arts. This was because the spirit eyes would lose its effect once it encountered an object with spiritual energy. At this moment, Yi Hailon could see a stone wall at the corner of the pool of water. He could not see it clearly, but he could only see its general shape. This also meant that there was a very thin layer of spiritual energy on this stone wall. Could it be that he was talking about this stone wall that has a trace of spiritual energy? What use does this thing have for me? Yi Hailon was puzzled. The maid beside her replied, "Young miss, why do you care about what that person said? There are so many people from the 5 great sects who want to attract your attention. I think he's just doing it on purpose to make young miss curious." That's right. Perhaps he has already placed something under the pool. If young miss goes down to investigate, wouldn't you be falling into his trap? Yi Hailon suddenly smiled faintly. This smile seemed to startle the 2 maids. However, her next words made their faces droop. Then, 2 splashes of water appeared on the surface of the lake. The 2 maids swam through the water like fish. After a while, the 2 maids walked out of the lake with disheveled hair and drenched clothes. Then, with a wave of spiritual energy, the water on their bodies evaporated. "Young miss, there's nothing in here. That guy's indeed a liar. Look, this is that stone wall. It's just that a few low-grade spirit stones are inlaid on it. Even the spiritual energy has almost disappeared. Even if this kind of thing was thrown on the road, I'm afraid no one would pick it up, let alone at the bottom of the lake. The two pretty maids were obviously very angry about diving into the lake and fishing out such a stone wall. However, they did not notice that Yehalen's eyes gradually lit up. Yehalen's hand flashed with spiritual energy, and this stone wall was kept in the storage ring. Then, she turned around and walked towards the 5 great sects with the 2 maids. The 2 maids stared at Yehalan and looked at each other with puzzlement. They hurriedly chased after Yehalan and asked. Unfortunately, Yehalan did not answer on the other side. Long Chun returned to the 100 Smelting Clan's cave abode. At this moment, he was not relaxed. 100 Smelting Peak, the cave abode Long Chun was in on the 15th floor of the cave abodes was overcrowded. Among them, there was the alchemist branch headed by Li Fong and the talisman branch headed by Deng Ji. If that was all, it would be fine. In front of Long Chun, in the center of the 2 groups of people, sat the 100 Smelting Clan sect master and several 100 Smelting Clan elders. Long Chun looked at the 100 Smelting Clan's sect master and smiled bitterly. Although he intended to show his talent, he did not expect that the 100 Smelting Clan's sect master would come in person. Long Chun, take out the pills you refined today and let me see. The 100 Smelting Clan's sect master had a square face and big ears. His deep voice spread. And the so-called receiving formation pill. Long Chun nodded and did not hesitate, directly handing 2 pills to the sect master. When his gaze fell upon the pill that was filled with cracks, his brows gradually furrowed, but a bright light flashed in his eyes. After a long while, he handed the 2 pills back to Long Chun. The 100 Smelting Clan's sect master and several elders with high status looked at each other, and finally said to Long Chun, Long Chun, are you willing to give the refining method of this receiving formation pill to our 100 Smelting Clan? Everyone looked at Long Chun with burning eyes, as if they cared more about the receiving formation pill than the cracked pills. Long Chun's mouth showed a faint smile. He naturally understood what the 100 Smelting Clan's sect master meant and why he made such a choice. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.